Mars is the Earth's space cousin. It's the fourth planet in our solar system, about half the size of the Earth. It also has two small moon buddies, Phobos and Deimos. These moons are shaped like potatoes. Phobos is the drama king, moving closer to Mars and planning a crash landing in about 50 million years. Deimos is much calmer though, hanging out farther away from Mars. Mars got a cool nickname, the Red Planet, thanks to its rusty red surface. This color was so bright that it was spotted by astronomers many years ago. Even you can sometimes see it in the sky with the naked eye, a small scarlet dot. And maybe it has hot vibes, but in reality, Mars is a very cold desert. The temperatures there can drop as low as minus 240 degrees Fahrenheit. But was Mars always nothing more than a rusty-looking desert? Actually, no. Scientists believe that perhaps many years ago, this planet was similar to ours. Meet Curiosity, the detective rover made by NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Scientists want to know all about the Martian weather, landscape, and other stuff like that. Curiosity is a pretty heavy car-sized robot. It weighs about 1,985 pounds. It embarked on its journey on November 26, 2011. The rover pulled off a landing on Mars on August 6, 2012. Originally, Curiosity's mission was supposed to last for 2 years, but it's still going strong. Curiosity is basically a space lab on wheels. It's packed with cameras, spectrometers, radiation detectors, and sensors to sniff out the Martian environment. As Curiosity roams around, it rewinds Mars history. And during its mission, the rover discovered something incredible: signs of lakes and rivers from long ago. You see, Curiosity's favorite spot to play around is Gale Crater. It's a prehistoric Martian oasis where water might have hung out. There's this huge mountain in the middle called Mount Sharp. This place is taller than 10 Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other. And it's got layers of rocks that hold Mars's ancient secrets. Recently, scientists spotted something great when studying Curiosity's data: mud tracks. What's so surprising about that? Well, these aren't just any old tracks. They're like messages from the past. They mean that the Martian ground used to get wet and then dry out again. The mud on the ground would shrink and crack during the drying phases, making these T-shaped junctions. Moreover, it seems like the ground on Mars went through several wet-dry cycles. It happened maybe up to 10 times. This made the junctions turn into Y-shaped cracks. When a bunch of Y-shaped cracks got together, they made a super cool pattern, something like a patchwork of hexagons. It looked just like honeycombs, or even a dragon's skin. Each of these hexagons are the size of candy. Similar cycles have happened on Earth, and they're linked to the birth of life. When water dries up, it leaves behind concentrated stuff that's great for chemical reactions, and these reactions might be the same ones that kickstart life. These hexagons have been hanging around for a really long time, billions of years. That means that Mars once had a climate kind of like Earth's, and maybe even life. In fact, the Red Planet even has some signs of water right now, in the form of hidden ice at the poles. Mars has the North and South poles, and just like with the Earth, they're Red Planet's ice caps. Picture the North Cap as a big, icy pancake about 620 miles wide. The South Cap is a bit smaller, about 220 miles wide, but it's got a thicker ice layer, almost like a snowball with a strong shell. When it's winter at the poles, it's an incredibly long nighttime. No sunlight, just chilly darkness. During that time, around 30% of the air turns into frozen CO2. It's dry ice, the same stuff that's often used in horror movies. But when the poles wake up to sunlight, the dry ice turns back into gas. All this freezing and thawing makes clouds and frost, just like on Earth. One time, a rover named Opportunity even caught some clouds made of water ice. But it doesn't necessarily mean Mars was once thriving just like the Earth. Life needs more than just wet, dry cycles to pop up. It needs the right atmosphere and other special ingredients. We're not sure if Mars had all of those, and even if it did, there's no guarantee that life actually happened. But this raises another very important question. has Mars ever hosted tiny living creatures? Curiosity isn't the only robot that tries to find the answer to that. There's also a rover called Perseverance. It's trying to find clues about Martian life. It's digging into an old Martian crater once filled with water. And like a space archaeologist, Perseverance is searching for fossilized signs of ancient critters. And here's the funny thing. Some scientists think that we've stumbled upon it almost half a century ago. The only problem is, we might have accidentally destroyed it. It happened even before Curiosity started rolling around Mars. Back in the 1980s, two cool NASA's landers, Viking 1 and Viking 2, made a pit stop on the Red Planet. These landers took a selfie, and then they also did some funky experiments on the Martian soil, all in the name of finding signs of life. What they found is some weird organic stuff called perchlorate. It's a compound that we use in fireworks or rocket fuel. But most results didn't seem that promising. They even mixed up some soil with water and nutrients, hoping that if there were Martian microbes, they'd snack on the goodies and return radioactive gas as a result. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Now, here's the problem. Some scientists think that maybe the water they added back then actually destroyed those tiny Martian critters. Poor microbes were just hanging out and suddenly got soaked by a bunch of weird liquid. Something like this wouldn't be very pleasant for the Earth microbes. They live inside rocks and they're sucking water from the air. Pouring water on them would result in a total disaster. So, of course, giving them nutrients after that wouldn't do anything. If you've just barely survived a water bath, you're probably not in the mood for a feast. Perhaps these Martian buddies might have something called hydrogen peroxide in their cells. It helps them live in an extreme environment. If that's true, it could explain all the results from the experiments. You see, the instruments heated up the samples, so if there was hydrogen peroxide, it would have gone boom, wiping off the little guys and turning their cozy homes instantly. Imagine how ridiculous it would be if it turns out that we accidentally destroyed the only signs of life on Mars. Ideally, we need a new mission to Mars to test this theory. Let's hope it's not true. In any case, the journey isn't over. There are more missions planned for Mars, and humans might even visit this planet someday. The next mission is the Mars Sample Return. It's a super cool teamwork project between NASA and ESA. They're teaming up to bring back souvenirs from Mars, collected by NASA's trusty Mars Perseverance rover. There's going to be a whole bunch of spaceships. They'll work together to bring these precious Mars samples back. The samples are planned to arrive on Earth in the early to mid-2030s. And the fun doesn't stop at Mars. Our Mars missions are a warm-up for an even bigger adventure, exploring icy moons around Saturn and Jupiter. These moons have hidden oceans beneath their icy surfaces, and who knows what kinds of space secrets they're hiding. But whether it's Mars, icy moons, or beyond, our quest to find extraterrestrial life continues. In addition, we are slowly starting to find more and more organic materials on Mars, and maybe one day we'll finally find some microbes in our solar system. Let's hope for it and stay tuned.
Something is happening on the Red Planet! Scientists believed that they knew nearly everything about its atmosphere, but a NASA rover has discovered something unexpected. There's more oxygen on Mars than they thought, and it behaves in weird ways. In the spring and summer, oxygen levels go up even more, and no one knows why. Now, you might think that when there's oxygen in an atmosphere, it's mostly because there's life somewhere around, like trees on Earth that produce oxygen through photosynthesis. But on Mars, it's not that simple. Non-living processes can also create oxygen, so we can't surely say that its presence means there's life on Mars. Mars has long been one of the main candidates when it comes to looking for signs of extraterrestrial life. Back in the 90s, scientists announced they had spotted potential proof there could be life on Mars because of microbes they had found in a meteorite that had arrived from the Red Planet. It looked like they had found fossils of bacteria. They actually stumbled upon tiny crystals of magnetite in the meteorite, which they believed could only have been produced by living organisms. It was such a mind-boggling discovery. People were excited, but many were also skeptical. It didn't prove there really was life on the red planet. Maybe there was life there a long time ago. The meteorite is thought to have originally formed on Mars billions of years ago, and to have landed on Earth thousands of years ago. Skeptics soon started to pick apart the evidence and eventually found some things that didn't make sense. For example, these magnetite crystals. No one could be sure how they formed. Why do they have to be bacteria? Some research has shown they could be the result of shock waves. Recently, the Perseverance rover has collected a couple of new rock samples from the Jezero crater on Mars. The theory says that about 3 billion years ago, before the red planet lost most of its atmosphere and basically just dried out, there was a big lake with a river flowing from it in that area. Whoa, what a great environment for life! Perseverance studied mud samples it had found on the bottom of the evaporated saltwater lake. Scientists were amazed to see a record number of sulfate molecules, something we usually find in mollusk shells on our home planet. Such organisms evolved a couple of 100 million years ago, but maybe there was a time when some of their space ancestors lived in water bodies on Mars. Mars has weaker gravity than Earth, which means these weird species could have got really big there, way bigger than their Earth cousins. Gravity plays a significant role when it comes to limiting the size of organisms. Bigger organisms need more energy to move against gravitational forces, but the creatures that may have lived there long ago are just a mix of hypothesis and our imagination, something that's still really hard to prove. Meet the Curiosity rover, another robot NASA is using to explore Mars. Curiosity has been in charge of measuring the composition of the atmosphere of the red planet for many years now. The rover has discovered that it mostly consists of carbon dioxide and a little bit of nitrogen and argon. The atmosphere of Mars has only 0.1% of oxygen, since, as far as we know at the moment, Mars doesn't have plants that could produce enough oxygen. But Curiosity has also discovered anomalies no one can really explain. It's found out that there are spikes in oxygen levels in the Gale crater during the Martian spring and summer. Every year, oxygen levels go up and down in unpredictable patterns there. What's even more interesting is that the oxygen spike is similar to a seasonal spike in methane, which is a gas we often associate with life on Earth. No wonder scientists are scratching their heads and wondering if there's a connection between the two gases, and if they both come from the same source on the Martian surface. Is there something big that breathes there? Come on, we'll be happy even with some small space worms in the soil. There's a type of salt called perchlorates in the Martian soil. Some scientists believe perchlorates might be responsible for the strange spikes in oxygen levels. But like with most things we know about space, it's just a theory. Also, scientists think that perchlorates breaking down in the Martian soil release oxygen too slowly to cause and explain the sudden increase in oxygen levels. One of the suspects is hydrogen peroxide, which is like water's unstable cousin. Hydrogen peroxide forms when sunlight breaks up carbon dioxide and water vapor in the Martian atmosphere. It can seep into the soil and stick to particles underground, which means it forms some kind of oxygen storage tank. Some data even show there are pockets of subsurface water in the Martian soil that may be hiding enough dissolved oxygen to actually support life. But even if the hydrogen peroxide could stay in the soil for millions of years, it would still only explain a small part of the increase in the level of oxygen. So you can't blame it for the whole thing. We can also take a look at an old experiment from the 1970s, where scientists found that moistening the Martian soil caused it to release a lot of oxygen. However, they did this experiment at a warmer temperature than the planet's average. And again, it doesn't explain how the oxygen spike keeps happening every year. None of the clues we have seems to fit the case. Mars may not have enough of its own oxygen, but it's possible to make this gas there. NASA conducted a small experiment where they tried and managed to produce oxygen on Mars. MOXIE is a device that can make oxygen on Mars. It managed to produce enough oxygen for an astronaut to breathe for 100 minutes. This awesome device worked in pretty tough conditions, at night or during the day, at extreme temperatures, and during the crazy dust storms the red planet is known for. Despite all this, MOXIE still kept up with producing high-purity oxygen. MOXIE is a clever device that can make oxygen on Mars by taking in carbon dioxide from the planet's atmosphere and heating it up to incredibly high temperatures. This allows the device to pull oxygen atoms from the carbon dioxide and produce breathable oxygen gas. If we want to use MOXIE to make enough oxygen for human missions to Mars, we need to make a bigger version of the device. But if we make it bigger, we might have trouble keeping it at the right temperature and making sure it heats up evenly without breaking. The ultimate goal would be to create an oxygen device that could continuously support a human mission for about 400 days. With a bigger version of MOXIE, we'd have enough oxygen to support crew members and even propel a return rocket to our home planet. When you see the dusty red surface of Mars, you can't say it's a place that hides liquid water underneath. Some say it's too cold for water to exist on Mars anyway. But there are stories that there could be a hidden world of liquid water, just like subglacial lakes in Antarctica. And to find out more, we might have to drill down about a mile beneath the surface. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But in the meantime, scientists have been using a spacecraft called Mars Express to study radar reflections around the southern pole of Mars. The reflections seem to indicate there could be liquid water, and the planet's interior might be keeping it warm. But some claim it might just be rock. We hope there are underground lakes on Mars because it would be a perfect spot to look for life. After all, scientists have found bacteria living in subglacial lakes on Earth. But we don't know for sure how deep they are, or if they're just small veins of water in the ice. Only time and more exploration will tell.
We've been dreaming about life on Mars for a long time. Not only about growing potatoes there in the future, but also about all the potatoes that could have been there in the past. Has there ever been life on Mars? Recently, scientists have found something that could be evidence of that. Let's find out what happened. Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun. A human hasn't set foot on Mars yet, but robots have set their wheels. The first spacecraft that visited the red planet were NASA Viking landers. They flew there back in 1976 and sent us a lot of interesting data. Back then, we didn't know anything about Mars. To us, it looked like a cold, lifeless desert. But since we're so similar, scientists began to wonder, has it always been like this? Or is it possible that once Mars used to be thriving and full of life? And in 2022, NASA's Mars rover Perseverance found something that could shed a light on this mystery. But first of all, what is Perseverance? Scientists have suggested that if there was life on Mars once, it's unlikely that it could simply disappear without a trace. It must have left some traces, perhaps underground, where they would be protected from radioactive solar tantrums and other nastiness. So we need to check the rocks. It's important to note that we aren't looking for life on Mars right now. There most likely isn't any. Instead, we want to look into the distant past of our twin planet. We're talking billions of years ago, when Mars could have been warm, green, and far from lifeless. In other words, we have to find dead microbes and various chemical compounds similar to ones on the Earth. This is the mission of our main character, Perseverance. It arrived on Mars in February of 2021. The spacecraft landed on the bottom of the 30-mile-wide Jezero crater, and after landing, it scooted over to the west, to the place that prompted scientists to choose Jezero for research. This place is a dried-up river delta, and this former river is already more than 3.5 billion years old. The Jezero crater itself was once a large lake. Yup, apparently there was life on Mars, and scientists have suggested that these places would be perfect as bodyguards of microbes. That's exactly what bacteria do on Earth. They hide, being still in the depths of lakes and ponds, so we could probably find traces there. The researchers believe that this particular lake has the highest scientific value in the entire mission. The highest chance to find rocks on which such bacteria could survive is here in Jezero. So Perseverance went to the delta. The row wasn't easy though. The rover missed a little and landed further than planned. As one famous movie said, "This little maneuver's going to cost us 51 years." Fortunately, Perseverance took only 1 year, and on the way, it was able to explore Jezero a little. The rover uses a complex built-in tool to explore the world. The tool is called Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals, or just SHERLOC. Boy, NASA sure loves its acronyms. As the device approached the delta, the signal of organic molecules became stronger. Soon, these signals were everywhere, and besides, they were the brightest that the scientists have ever seen. What does it mean? Elementary, my dear Watson. You know, Sherlock. It's time to dig. Since July 2021, Perseverance has drilled and collected 4 thin cores of sedimentary rock. The total number of collected rocks at the moment is 12. This is the first time in history that we're collecting something like this on another planet. These 4 cores were found on 2 rocks called Skinner Ridge and Wildcat Ridge. The first pair of cores, the ones from the Skinner Ridge, don't seem very interesting at first glance. They're quite close to what we can find in many places on Earth. However, if we look at them closer, we'll see that they're dotted with round grains of some dark material. These dark grains could have once been deposited on them by an ancient river, the same one that flowed into Jezero. It's possible that the river brought them from places hundreds of miles away from Jezero, and that's pretty cool. If we study these cores, we'll be able to learn even more about the far corners of Mars. Well, there are no corners on it, but you get the idea. Then, in April 2022, Perseverance did arrive at the delta, and then scientists finally found what they were looking for. The discovery, to put it mildly, excited them. They found 2 more cores, which held organic substances. This pair was taken from the Wildcat Ridge. It's found very close to the Skinner Ridge, but the 2 rocks are quite different from each other. These samples are lighter in color and more uniform. Most likely, they're mudstone, an unusual rock similar to clay, but harder and unable to absorb water. They're also finer grain than the cores of the Skinner Ridge. Why does it matter? Because the finer the grains in the stone, the more likely it is that there may be some traces of a past life in it. On Earth, fine-grained stones most often lie on the bottoms of ponds and in similar places. There, they can preserve the remains of dead organisms and similar stuff for years. And this is exactly what we found on them. Additionally, according to scientists, there was more organic matter in these 2 cores than in any other place studied by Perseverance so far. It probably accumulated there while the lake was gradually evaporating billions of years ago. So, there really was life on Mars? Well, let's slow down a little. Organic substances are molecules holding carbon. And yes, on Earth, they're most often associated with life, but not always. Sometimes they can form as a result of other things. Therefore, we cannot say for sure whether there was life on Mars. We don't know if these molecules really remain from some Martian microbes, or if they're the result of some other things. But the discovery is still very significant. We have to literally keep digging this way. To learn more about this organic matter, scientists need to collect a couple more samples of fine-grained rock. It would also be great to study the material lying around these former reservoirs. Perseverance has already moved to another area, to a place with a beautiful name, Enchanted Lake. Now it needs to look for similar things there. It will also continue to study Lake Jezero. Eventually, Perseverance will climb to the top of the delta and then continue exploring ancient sites outside the crater. Sometime before the end of 2022, Perseverance will probably have 6 or more samples of the Martian cores. Unfortunately, its tools, though complex, are quite limited. This data alone won't be enough for us to get a complete picture. Therefore, NASA plans to send other spacecraft to Jezero in the coming years. Together with the European Space Agency, they're working on the next robotic mission, known as the Mars Sample Return. The name speaks for itself. These devices will arrive and take away all the test tubes from the old Prospector Perseverance. After that, these samples will be delivered to Earth, though not by Amazon Prime, and then scientists will be able to analyze them in advanced laboratories. However, all this will take a really long time. The launch of this mission is scheduled for 2027-2028, and the spacecrafts won't be able to return until 2033. But if everything goes well, it will be the first samples in history delivered to Earth from Mars. In other words, there's still enough space for research, literally. And yes, we don't yet know the true meaning of these finds. But that's why the entire mission was created, right? And who knows? Maybe in a few years we'll finally find out the truth about what happened on Mars billions of years ago. Ooh, check out the Martian! Made you look. Look. Have we found another civilization? Is that a door to someone's home on another planet? Can we peek through the windows? After all, it was NASA's Curiosity rover that sent this image to Earth, and right now, this rover is exploring the surface of Mars. Unfortunately, astronomers were fast to disappoint us. They claimed that it was just a natural part of the Martian landscape. There are several clues that made them think it wasn't a real door. For example, it's tiny, a mere 3 feet high. But it might simply mean the Martians aren't that tall, you may object. But scientists keep insisting that what looks like a door is actually an opening in a rock created by natural forces, like winds and erosion. The thing is, if you look at the rock attentively, you may notice strata, the layers of silt that stand out because they're harder than the surrounding material. These strata dip here on the left and a bit higher on the right. They likely appeared around 4 billion years ago in a river or a wind-blown dune. Since the strata became visible, powerful Martian winds have eroded them even more, and now you can see that they disappear inside the door. And look at this. See those cracks? Yeah, those. That's how rocks weather on the red planet. This small cave probably formed when several fractures crossed the strata. A pretty large boulder might have fallen out under its own weight, and this created the door-shaped opening. Now, this theory is quite plausible, because even though the gravity on Mars isn't as strong as on Earth, it's still strong enough to do it. Besides, see that rock to the right of the opening? It has a suspiciously smooth vertical edge. It must be the culprit. It probably fell out not so long ago, and Martian winds haven't got rid of it yet. And winds on Mars can be exceptionally powerful. This planet is infamous for its intense dust storms. Sometimes they kick up so much dust that you can see it through a telescope on Earth. Such storms occur every year and cover continent-sized areas. They also last for weeks at a time. But besides these annual storms, there are even larger storms that happen much more rarely, but they're more powerful and way more intense. Those are called global dust storms because they encircle the entire planet. But even if you got caught in the most severe storm on Mars, it wouldn't be as terrible as you might think. The wind speed on the worst Martian storms reaches 60 miles an hour tops. Hurricane-force winds on our planet can be twice that speed. You should also keep in mind that the atmosphere on the red planet is 1% as dense as the atmosphere on Earth. That's why, if you decided to fly a kite on Mars, you'd need the wind to be much faster than on Earth. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be able to get the kite in the air. In other words, even though it's quite windy on Mars, it doesn't feel as intense as on our home planet. Oh, by the way, you might have noticed I keep calling Mars the red planet. Why? Look, our neighbor is covered in dust, soil, and rock that is rich in iron oxide. That's what gives the surface of the planet its trademark red hue. And look, there's the trademark. Nah, just kidding. Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun. Not so far away from the star, you might say, and still, it's a cold and deserted world. The average temperature on its surface is minus 81 degrees Fahrenheit. But if you ever visit one of its poles during the wintertime, bring a lot of warm clothing. because the temperatures are likely to drop to minus 220 degrees there. In the summer, though, you might feel very comfortable in some regions. There, the temperatures can rise to 70 degrees, not very different from what we're used to. Mars is one of the most explored space bodies in the solar system. At the moment, NASA has 2 rovers roaming the red landscapes, Curiosity and Perseverance. There's also one lander called InSight and helicopter Ingenuity, nicknamed Ginny. Perseverance is the most advanced and largest rover ever sent to another world. The journey to the red planet took 203 days, and Ginny traveled to Mars attached to the belly of Perseverance. Sounds cozy. And now, I'm going to tell you something really curious. Let's say you're a Babylonian who lived around 5,000 years ago. Babylonia was an empire in ancient Mesopotamia. Just think back to 6th grade. Anyway, your neighbor comes up to you and says, "What day is it today?" And what do you answer? "It's Mars Day." Wait, what? When the ancient Babylonians created the week, they decided to divide it into 7 parts. Each day got named after some space body, like the Moon, the Sun, Venus, and so on. Mars Day was on Tuesday. The Babylonians believed that each of these space objects influenced their lives on the day named after it. And since Mars was red in color, they associated it with aggression. That's why on Tuesdays, they had special ceremonies to avoid the influence of the unfriendly planet. Indeed, Mars might seem unfriendly to a tired traveler. Its atmosphere is very thin. Its volume is a near 1% of the atmosphere on Earth. In other words, there's 99% less air to breathe on the red planet. Mars's atmosphere is mostly made up of carbon dioxide. At such high concentrations, it's toxic for us humans. And if you were looking for some oxygen to breathe on Mars, you'd come away empty-handed. There's only 0.1% of oxygen in the air on the red planet. That's definitely not enough for you to survive there. At the moment, Mars has 2 moons, Deimos and Phobos. Astronomers think they may be asteroids once caught in the gravitational field of the planet. The moons are shaped like potatoes. That's because their mass is too little for gravity to give them a spherical form. Potatoes, eh? Maybe they should be renamed mashed and au gratin. One day, Mars will get a ring of its own. It might happen in the next 20 to 40 million years. Will Brightside be there? Stay tuned. Mars's gravitational forces will tear apart the planet's largest moon, Phobos. Hey, it really will get mashed. Some chunks of the former moon will crash into Mars, and others will break apart and create the ring around the planet. This ring might exist for at least 100 million years. The surface of Mars is cut by a huge canyon system known as Valles Marineris. Sounds like a pasta sauce. If it were on Earth, it'd stretch all the way from New York to California, over 3,000 miles. At its widest part, the largest canyon on Mars is 200 miles, and it reaches 4 miles at its deepest point. If you still have difficulties imagining the sheer size of this natural phenomenon, here you go. Valles Marineris is 10 times the size of the Grand Canyon on Earth. Now, since we're on the subject of gigantic things, let's talk about Olympus Mons. This is the largest volcano in the solar system, and it's on Mars too. It's 3 times as tall as Mount Everest on our planet, and that's the tallest mountain above sea level. And the base of Olympus Mons is as large as the state of New Mexico. Now, scientists think there could have been water on Mars in the past. What made them think so? They found lots of ancient river valley networks and lake beds on the surface of the red planet. Plus, on Mars, there are minerals and rocks that could only form in liquid water. Mars might even have experienced terrible floods 3.5 billion years ago. These days, there's still some water on the red planet, but Mars's atmosphere is too thin for this water to stay in its liquid form on the surface. Now, it only exists in the form of water ice. You can find it just under the surface of the planet in its polar regions. The only place where this water is visible is at the North Polar Ice Cap. Also, sometimes, salty water flows down crater walls and hillsides, and there are tiny quantities of water in the planet's atmosphere, but it only exists as vapor. So, as a vacation spot, I think I'll pass.
On the 30th of May, 2024, scientists made a shocking discovery. A rock that cracked open after NASA's Curiosity Mars rover drove over it revealed yellow sulfur crystals. It was something never seen on the red planet before. Starting from October 2023, Curiosity has been exploring an area rich in sulfates. That's a kind of salt that forms when water evaporates and contains sulfur. But in the past, all discovered rocks only had mixes of sulfur and other materials, while the rock found by the rover is made of pure sulfur. Now, most people associate sulfur with that yucky stench of rotten eggs, but in reality, elemental sulfur doesn't have any smell. It forms pretty rarely and needs very particular conditions. And scientists have never associated such conditions with that very location on the red planet. Now guess what? Curiosity then found an entire field of bright rocks similar to the one it had crashed, made of pure sulfur. Specialists explain that it's something that shouldn't be there. So now, they have to find a way to explain this phenomenon. It's just one of a few interesting findings Curiosity has made during its exploration of the Geddes Vallis Channel. That's a groove running down a slope of 3-mile-tall Mount Sharp. The rover has been ascending the base of this mountain since 2014. Each layer of the mountain represents a certain period of the history of the red planet. And the main mission of Curiosity is to figure out when and where ancient Martian terrain could have provided nutrients for microbial life. Geddes Vallis had been spotted from space years before Curiosity was launched. This channel became one of the main reasons scientists wanted to visit this part of Mars. They believe that the channel might have been carved by flows of liquid water and debris. They supposedly left a ridge of boulders and sediment going 2 miles down the mountslide below the channel. Since Curiosity arrived at the channel earlier this year, researchers have been trying to figure out whether landslides or ancient floodwaters built up the large piles of debris rising from the channel's floor. The latest data from Curiosity hints that both factors played their own roles in this process. Some mounds look as if they were left by wild flows of water and debris, and others seem to result from local landslides. The thing is, stones carried by water flows got rounded like river rocks, and angular rocks are likely to have been deposited by dry avalanches. One more detail: water soaked all the material that settled in that area, and the resulting chemical reactions bleached white halo shapes into some rocks. Over time, wind and sand erosion revealed those shapes. Researchers say that the period when it was all happening wasn't a quiet one for Mars. There was an astonishing amount of activity there. Multiple flows down the channel included severe floods and boulder-rich flows. All this evidence of water tells a more complex story than what scientists expected to find in that region. That's why they've been so eager to lay their hands on a rock sample from the channel. It would let them learn more about the history of that area. Well, on the 18th of June, they got their chance. The sulfur rocks were tiny and brittle, so they couldn't be sampled using the drill. But nearby, Curiosity found a large rock that was later nicknamed Mammoth Lakes. Rover engineers had to look for a part of the rock that could allow safe drilling. Luckily, there was a suitable parking spot on the loose, sloping surface of the rock. Curiosity bored its 41st hole with the help of a powerful drill. Then, the rover trickled the powderized rock into its belly for further analysis. This way, scientists will be able to figure out what material the rock was made of. Curiosity has already moved away from Mammoth Lakes. Now, the rover is off to search for other surprises the channel has prepared for us Earthlings.
Recently, scientists have made an astounding discovery that can change the entire course of Mars exploration. Apparently, there are oceans of liquid water on the red planet, so the future looks bright. We could use this water to support future missions, and then even relocate to Mars, since we wouldn't need to worry about where to get this precious liquid, right? Well, there's one big problem. These oceans of liquid water are in Mars, so deep inside that we aren't likely to get there. At least that's what a new analysis of seismic data collected by the Mars Insight lander claims. Huge reserves of liquid water seem to be the best explanation for some seismic quirks of the red planet. So all this precious water is out of our reach. But we need to find it to solve the puzzle of the aquatic history of our blushing, dusty neighbor. And the first thing we need to do is identify where the water is and how much of it the planet is hiding.
Navigation has confirmed that the parachute has deployed and we are seeing significant deceleration.
Now, our rovers are scurrying about on the surface of the red planet, gathering all the available data on the planet's surface geology. And it's getting increasingly obvious that Mars was once covered with water. Many factors, from Martian terrains to ancient dry lake beds and deltas, suggest that there was a time when the planet was quite soppy. These days, there's still some water on and right below the surface of Mars, but it's in the form of ice and nowhere near what Mars had in the ancient past. To understand how much of it could have been on the red planet billions of years ago, we must know where all this water went. There are two spots where the water could have gone: into space or toward the interior of Mars. Then it could have been isolated as either liquid reservoirs or ice deposits. Currently, we don't have any way of measuring how much water once leaked away. But now, we finally can find out more about the gooey center of the red planet. All thanks to the Mars InSight lander. It isn't operating anymore, but from November 2018 to December 2022, it was listening to the hums and rumbles and monitoring the activity below its feet. The thing is, acoustic waves generated by seismic activity deep inside the planet can change according to the composition and density of the material these waves are moving through. And scientists can get a lot of information analyzing the behavior of seismic waves. In this case, they used a model similar to those used to map underground oil fields and aquifers on our home planet. Then, with the help of this model, they analyzed the data gathered by InSight on Mars. They discovered that the best explanation could be that there was a layer of fractured rocks whose cracks were filled with water deep under the surface of the red planet. That layer could be at a depth of 7 to 12 miles. That's why it would be extremely tricky for future missions to get to it. And still, the new discovery could help us understand the Martian water cycle. Confirming the existence of a large reservoir of liquid water can help us sneak a peek at what the climate on Mars used to be, or what it could be like one day. And if once Mars had a lot of water, it could have been habitable in the ancient past and might become habitable in the future. Water is crucial for life as we know it, so underground water reservoirs on the red planet could already be habitable. Maybe, while we're talking, tiny microorganisms or even some tentacled creatures are living their lives in the comfort of their underground home. On Earth, super deep mines do host life, and the bottom of the ocean, with its immense unbelievable pressures, isn't lifeless either. So far, we haven't found any evidence of life on Mars, but for now, it sounds like this place has the potential to sustain life. InSight data has shown that there isn't likely to be a lot of water ice in the upper crust of the planet, at least in the region around the lander. But if it turns out that there is a water-rich layer deep below the surface and stretching around the entire globe of the planet, then there would be enough water to fill ancient ocean beds and even more. Now, Mars isn't the only place outside Earth where there is water or where we might one day find water. Take the good old Moon, for example. On Earth's natural satellite, water can be found all over the surface, but it's not the water you might be imagining. On the Moon, water remains mostly as ice, and it's distributed unevenly. For example, the poles of the Moon are the regions that never receive sunlight. This is the reason they're extremely cold, and it's no wonder there's a lot of ice there. The ice in these areas is often mixed with the lunar soil and hiding deep below the surface. Then there's Enceladus, the sixth largest moon of Saturn. In reality, it's not that large, just 314 miles across. In other words, this moon is small enough to fit inside Arizona. Ooh, we should try that. Well, interestingly, when the Cassini space probe first arrived at Saturn, researchers were expecting Enceladus to be a frozen ball of ice. But what they saw was plumes of icy particles and water vapor erupting from geysers on the moon's surface. it was clear that there was a massive ocean between the moon's rocky core and its icy shell. Then there's Jupiter's moon Europa. Scientists think that this world is one of the most promising places in the solar system when it comes to searching for new life forms. That's because Europa has a huge saltwater ocean as deep as 40 to 100 miles. And even though it's under a layer of ice that is likely to be 10 to 20 miles thick, it's still potentially habitable. Astronomers believe that plumes of water might erupt from cracks in the ice shell and release the contents of the moon's ocean into space. The temperature, pressure, and chemistry are very different on Europa, and astronomers aren't sure yet how the ice behaves there. That's the main reason they haven't figured out yet how deep or large the water reservoirs on Europa are and how long they need to refreeze. But out of all the places where we could find water in the universe, the most bizarre is probably open space. In 2011, 2 teams of astronomers discovered a cloud of water floating freely among stars. It was the largest and farthest reservoir of water ever detected. So this massive cloud of water vapor surrounds a black hole. But not just any black hole. This one's a quasar, located 12 billion light-years from Earth. The conditions around this quasar must be really special to create such an enormous amount of water. This cloud contains 140 trillion times the volume of all the water on Earth. That's enough to give every person on the planet a whole planet's worth of water 20,000 times over. Sounds wild, doesn't it? But there's something even cooler. Astronomers think this water cloud formed just 1.6 billion years after the universe began. This discovery is yet another sign that water has been around all over the universe, even in its early days. But here's the kicker. Until they found this, scientists had never detected water vapor so far back in time. Sure, there's water in our Milky Way galaxy, but most of it's frozen solid in ice. This discovery really pushes the boundaries of what we know about water in the universe.
Hold on to your space helmets because NASA's Curiosity rover has just stumbled upon the wildest rock formation ever. And on April Fool's Day, isn't that just the weirdest coincidence? The device captured some images with some rocks that look like dragon bones. Now, let me take you back to 2012 when Curiosity made its grand entrance on Martian soil. It was like the queen bee of rovers, the biggest and most capable one at the time. And boy, has it been making waves since then. It's even discovered evidence of water and organic molecules on Mars. These findings were giant leaps in our quest to find out if Mars ever had its own little creatures. But hey, let's not forget that Curiosity is no spring chicken anymore. It's been trotting around Mars for a solid 11 years, and its heyday may have come and gone with the launch of the shiny new Perseverance rover. Nevertheless, Curiosity still manages to capture our imagination with its knack for spotting familiar-looking rocks. From objects shaped like fish backbones to ones that resemble traffic lights, Curiosity has given us plenty to marvel at. But now the internet is exploding with excitement over the jaw-dropping images from Curiosity's masked camera. People are going bonkers over what can only be described as dragon bones. One astrobiologist acknowledged we've seen our fair share of weird-looking objects on Mars. But this one exceeded all expectations. The current theory is that these unique ripples on the structure were formed after a whole lot of erosion, probably caused by the Martian winds. Now, you might be thinking, okay, cool, but what's the big deal about a funky rock? Well, for starters, it's a reminder of just how much we still have to uncover about our mysterious red neighbor. While we're gazing over potential dragon bones and daydreaming about interplanetary adventures, Curiosity has its serious hat on. Its main mission is to gather as much data as possible and figure out if Mars was ever a cozy home for teeny-tiny microbial life forms. It isn't the first time our trusty Curiosity rover has stumbled upon something truly out of this world. Our robotic explorer buddy has also given us a peek at a teeny-tiny rock on the red planet. It bears an uncanny resemblance to a fossilized book. Can you imagine stumbling upon a Martian library? On the 3,800th Martian day of its mission, our adventurous rover captured an intriguing snapshot of this unusual discovery. Using its nifty Mars hand lens imager attached to its robotic arm, Curiosity snapped a pic of this rock that looks like it's been plucked straight from a librarian's wildest dreams. Before you get too carried away with fantasies of outer space reading materials, Let's clarify the dimensions of this rock. While it may resemble a book, it's pint-sized in comparison. In fact, it's only a mere 1 inch across. So don't go expecting the next Martian bestseller to hit the shelves anytime soon. It's more of a pocket-sized edition, perfect for a quick read during interplanetary commutes. Now, before you get too excited about this discovery, do know that NASA officials commented that peculiarly shaped rocks are pretty common on Mars. Also, billions of years of relentless Martian winds have swept away everything except these uniquely shaped remnants. Curiosity has quite the eye for spotting unusual formations. Back in February 2022, our rover pal stumbled upon a mineral flower with branching patterns that looked like it had been styled by a florist. It measured a petite 0.4 inch in width, and just a few weeks later, on February 16th, Curiosity managed to capture some rocky evidence of ancient lakes, featuring teeny ripples and waves frozen in time. If you thought Mars was just a desolate red wasteland, think again. Scientists have even discovered larger-scale shapes etched into the Martian surface by ancient water. For instance, there's a rock formation that bears an uncanny resemblance to the adorable face of a teddy bear. Who knew Mars had a cuddly side? And to top it off, there's another rock that looks like the spitting image of the frizzy-haired cartoon character. But curiosity isn't just about oddities and peculiarities. Remember that time on February 2nd when the rover unveiled the first clear images of sun rays on Mars? Picture this. As the sun dips below the Martian horizon during sunrises or sunsets, its rays create a mesmerizing sight as they pierce through gaps in the clouds. It's like Mother Nature's own laser light show. There are even images online with a so-called doorway on Mars. And no, it's not a secret passage for little green Martians to hop in and out of, if that's what you're thinking. The internet went bonkers when Curiosity captured a snapshot that seemed to reveal an object resembling a door. Cue the weird theories and intergalactic excitement, nothing to worry about, as experts have chimed in with a down-to-earth explanation. According to specialists who know a thing or two about Mars geology, this particular structure is most likely the result of natural erosion. Boring answer, I know, but erosion is yet again to blame here. However, some scientists have also chimed in with a dash of humor on the matter. They pointed out that the door stands at a modest height of less than 3 feet. So even if we were to believe it's a doorway for Martians, we'd have to imagine a particular type of tiny extraterrestrial beings, like Martian hobbits. But let's get back to reality, shall we? The consensus among experts is that this door is nothing more than a shallow opening in the rock, cleverly crafted by the forces of nature. Those visible layers were likely deposited around 4 billion years ago under sedimentary conditions, potentially in a river or a wind-blown dune. The winds on Mars have been hard at work, eroding these layers over time, leaving behind the intriguing features we see today. And if you look closely, you'll notice a few natural vertical fractures scattered throughout the image. These fractures are a result of rocks weathering on Mars, and the small cave-like structure we've affectionately nicknamed the door seems to have formed at the intersection of these fractures and the aforementioned layers. It's almost as if a gigantic Martian boulder decided to take a tumble, creating this whimsical cave entrance. There's also a famous Mars crater that's not just your ordinary, run-of-the-mill hole in the ground. It's chock full of shiny opal gemstones. According to a cool new study, those mysterious halos of rocks surrounding cracks in the Martian crater might actually be made up of water-rich opal gemstones. Can you imagine that? Mars, the planet of bling! Curiosity yet again came to the rescue and did some serious snooping around. It seems there's an ancient dried-up lakebed on Mars that is teeming with opal gemstones. These objects could be evidence that water and rock have been having a grand old time beneath the Martian surface. Much more recently than anyone had previously thought, that is. Now, when scientists start talking about water, you know they're on the hunt for signs of life. After all, water is pretty crucial for life as we know it. But here's the catch. Water isn't flowing on Mars anymore. So these clever scientists have to put on their detective hats and search for geological signs that water once existed there. What does opal have to do with water on the Martian surface? Well, to make opal, you need rocks with a whole lot of silica and some good old H2O. There's more. Researchers also dove deep into the Curiosity rover's image archive and discovered that these opal-rich halos are not just hanging out in one spot. Nope. They seem to be spread out all over the place in Gale Crater, which is like a huge ancient lake bed. So what did these clever scientists do next? They ran some tests, of course. Using Curiosity's fancy instruments, they confirmed that these light-colored halos do, in fact, contain opal. All this data and those cool fracture halo pictures from earlier in the mission led the researchers to a mind-boggling conclusion. Water must have been hanging out all over Gale Crater for a long time after the ancient lake dried up. This means that life might have existed on Mars and for a bit longer than we'd been guessing. Who knows, maybe even into Mars's modern geological period, which, get this, started a whopping 2.9 billion years ago.
There are tons of weird things on Mars. Spoons, noodles, doors, even faces. Are they all really just rocks? Besides, it's not the only planet in our solar system full of mysterious things. Let's check them out. Recently, we found a strange thing on Mars that looks like a smooth, spoon-like object. It grabbed everyone's attention after NASA's Curiosity rover spotted it. The rock, with a handle and rounded tip, looks like it's floating in the rover's photo. People on the internet are puzzled about what it might be. Some are joking that it's a Martian's bowling pin, or even a shoehorn left by extraterrestrial creatures. But Andrew Good from NASA says it's not that exciting. Turns out it's just a rock shaped by the wind over a long time. These kinds of rocks with odd shapes are common on Mars. They're called ventifacts. Ventifact is a rock that can get scratched, dented, or smoothed out by tiny particles carried by the wind. You'll usually find these kinds of rocks in dry places where there's not much grass or trees to block the wind, and where there's a lot of sand blowing around. Sometimes, the wind can carve ventifacts into really cool shapes, like the mushroom rocks you can see in the White Desert National Park in Egypt. These rocks look like giant mushrooms because the wind wears away the bottom part faster than the top, making them stand tall and slim. Ventifacts aren't the only cool Martian rocks. Check out this series of surreal spikes protruding from the red surface. NASA's Curiosity rover stumbled upon them while exploring the Gale Crater on Mars. They quickly caught everyone's attention. Twisting structures resembling spikes looked like some extraterrestrial doors. Even the SETI Institute, an organization focused on searching for extraterrestrial life, tweeted about the image, referring to it as a cool rock. But in reality, these are just hoodoos. These tall and thin spires occur when hard rock sits atop softer rock layers. Martian spikes are likely cemented fillings of ancient fractures in sedimentary rock, with softer material eroded away over time. Again, there are many hoodoos on Earth too. They're also called fairy chimneys or tent rocks. You can find them in places like Utah's Bryce Canyon and the Colorado Plateau. NASA is excited about these weird structures because they can help us learn more about the history of the Gale Crater. There was also a rock that looked like a jelly donut. We called this rock Pinnacle Island. It was spotted by NASA's cameras. However, just 4 days earlier, it was nowhere to be seen. So how did it magically disappear? In a very anticlimactic way, it was kicked up by one of Opportunity's wheels as it traversed the Martian terrain. But there's still some mystery surrounding that jelly donut. Analysis revealed that Pinnacle Island contains unusually high levels of sulfur and manganese. Both of these things are water-soluble. In other words, there might have been some water action that created these elements in the rock. So this tiny thing suddenly caused a lot of drama, and an entire lawsuit against NASA. It claimed that the agency failed to investigate a possible fungus growing on Mars. Jelly donut fungus. But not all our findings are natural. Another puzzling discovery was this thing the Perseverance rover spotted. It's something that looks like tangled spaghetti or string. Just like the donut, this mysterious object showed up in a rover camera image and then vanished from the sandy ground in several days. It turns out that it could be debris from the rover's landing system. Perseverance landed in the Jezero crater in February 2021. It had a rough landing and accidentally scattered debris around. Some of these debris pieces have been showing up in the rover's images for a while now. The string-like object is likely a piece of shredded Dacron netting, which is a type of fiber used in thermal blankets. These blankets help regulate equipment temperatures during the super hot process of landing on Mars. It probably underwent significant unraveling and shredding due to strong forces during the landing. Thermal blankets lost a bunch of stuff back then. For example, this shiny foil piece spotted in June. The rover found it on a rock. What's remarkable is how far some of the debris has traveled. The rover landed about 1.2 miles away from where it's currently exploring. It's probably because the crash threw the debris into the air, and the Martian winds carried it over such a distance. Mars is known for its strong winds, which can move lightweight objects. However, while it's fun to stumble upon them on images, there are concerns about the debris and trash on Mars. We haven't even fixed this problem on Earth, and we're already creating it on Mars. The debris we left on the red planet is already accumulating in an area called Hogwallow Flats. Plus, the debris can accidentally contaminate the sample tubes used for collecting Martian rocks. So far, NASA isn't overly worried about this, but they're keeping a close eye on it to prevent any issues with the rovers. Now, how about not things, but animals? Curiosity caused quite a stir when it captured something that looked like a rat on Mars. Some started speculating that it could be evidence of indigenous Martian life, or even that this rodent was brought along by Curiosity. But the Mars rat, once again, turned out to be just a weird rock. It looked interesting because of the natural processes like wind erosion and mechanical abrasion. We also found some worm-looking things. Curiosity snapped a picture of a formation that looks like worms wriggling across the Martian landscape. Despite its tiny size, this formation stands out with its unique shape and rough texture. It's probably made of durable material resistant to Mars's harsh erosion. And finally, our top mysterious finding is the face on Mars. Cydonia is a region on Mars that has captured both scientific and popular interest. It's located in Mars's northern hemisphere. It lies between heavily cratered regions to the south and relatively smooth plains to the north. There's a theory that the northern plains may have once been ocean beds. Maybe Cydonia was once a coastal zone. This place is full of interesting and beautiful features that tell us a lot about the history of the Red Planet. But its most interesting feature was the Martian face. This thing gained widespread attention when it was snapped by the Viking 1 orbiter in 1976. Some believed that it was evidence of a long-lost Martian civilization. At first, NASA dismissed it as a trick of light and shadow. But after some analysis, it turned out to be, yep, another rock. We also saw a face of a bear. It was captured by the high-resolution imaging experiment camera. In an image, we can see a circular fracture pattern that looks like a bear's head, with two craters forming the eyes and a V-shaped collapse structure like the nose. The head likely formed because something heavy settled on top of an old hole in the ground. This hole was filled with either lava or mud. The nose-like feature is speculated to be a volcanic or mud vent. But why do we keep seeing these strange things on Mars? Sometimes our brains can trick us into seeing things like faces or objects in rocks and other things. But these are just illusions called pareidolia. Pareidolia is a psychological phenomenon that makes us see familiar patterns or shapes, especially faces, where none actually exist. It's because the brain encounters something it doesn't recognize or understand right away. It tries to find things that look the most like this one. So it sees random patterns, textures, or sounds as something meaningful and recognizable. That's why a chair and clothes on it seems like a super creepy human-like figure at night. It also causes you to see faces or shapes in clouds, or hear recognizable sounds and even words in random noise. It's a fascinating proof of the power of our perception, but we also should be careful with it and not let our imagination run wild.
You must have heard that humans were supposed to fly to Mars within the next 10 to 20 years, but now the mission seems to be at risk. A new study has revealed the dramatic effects that such a journey can have on the human body, and because of that, the entire plan is now at risk. Samples from over 40 missions, which involve both mice and humans, have shown that the conditions in space are likely to have an even more negative influence on our bodies than we thought. Both NASA and SpaceX are planning to send crewed missions to Mars in the coming decades, but new findings might put an end to these projects. Researchers at University College London have discovered that microgravity and galactic radiation in space cause serious health risks, and they become more and more pressing the longer someone is exposed to these conditions. Surprisingly, the body part at the highest risk is the kidneys. The research has shown that after less than a month in space, some parts of the kidneys show visible signs of shrinking. So before we go all the way to Mars, we'll need to develop measures to protect the kidneys and other parts of the body. This will allow astronauts who will take part of this mission to avoid irreversible damage to their health, which in turn means that future missions to Mars haven't been completely ruled out yet. The author of the study, Dr. Keith Sue, mentioned that they already knew about the issues that astronauts had after short space missions, like kidney stones for example, but they still don't know why such problems occur or what is going to happen to astronauts on much longer space flights, such as the planned mission to Mars. If they don't manage to develop new methods to protect the kidneys, astronauts who will eventually reach the Red Planet might need serious kidney treatment already on their way back. Unfortunately, the effects of radiation damage on kidneys appear pretty late. By the time they become apparent, it might be too late to prevent a kidney failure. This can be catastrophic, not only for the astronauts, but also for the entire mission's chances of success. Meanwhile, an astronaut on Mars is likely to receive up to 700 more daily radiation doses than those we get on our home planet. The Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere protect people from the non-stop bombardment of cosmic rays. These energetic particles travel close to the speed of light and can easily penetrate the human body. In space, astronauts aren't protected against this radiation as effectively as on Earth, which can increase the risk of many serious health issues during long missions. Damage to the human body can extend to the brain, heart, eyes, and central nervous system. Physicists studying cosmic radiation explain that one day in space is equivalent to the amount of radiation one receives on Earth for a whole year. Moreover, most of the changes in the genes of the astronauts are likely to be the result of radiation exposure. That's what a recent NASA's twin study claims. It has shown DNA damage in astronaut Scott Kelly compared to his identical twin and fellow astronaut Mark Kelly, who remained on our planet. Another source of space radiation are the unpredictable solar particle events. They deliver high doses of radiation in short periods of time, which can lead to radiation sickness if astronauts don't take special protective measures. Even space flights orbiting close to the Earth, including the International Space Station, have highly adverse health effects. These days, research communities are focused on musculoskeletal, neurological, ocular, and cardiovascular degeneration, and these issues can appear as soon as a few weeks into a mission. At the same time, the effects of low Earth orbit flights are less clear when we talk about other organs. More research is definitely needed.
A giant volcano has been found near Mars's equator. It was literally hiding in plain sight. It's deeply eroded but active from ancient to recent times. There might even be remnants of glacier ice near its base. That's why this discovery might indicate a promising new location to search for life, as well as a potential destination for future human and robotic exploration. The discovery of a giant volcano and a possible sheet of hidden glacier ice was announced at the 55th Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Texas. The volcano is located in the eastern part of Mars' Tharsis volcanic province, between Labyrinth of the Night and Valleys of Mariner. The formation was actually repeatedly spotted by spacecraft orbiting Mars, but it's so deeply eroded that it was hard to recognize it for what it really was. The structure is still awaiting its official name. At the moment, it's referred to as the Noctis volcano. It reaches a height of 29,600 feet and spans an impressive 280 miles across. Such a giant size indicates that the volcano has been active for a very long time. In its southeastern part, there's a thin recent volcanic deposit, and beneath, glacier ice might still be present. Scientists were examining the geology of the area where they had spotted the remains of a glacier the year before when they realized they were inside a volcano. Several clues gave away the volcanic origin of the eroded structure. For example, the area of the central summit has a few elevated mesas forming an arc. It reaches the highest point and then slopes downhill from the summit. The outer slopes extend out to 140 miles in different directions. The remains of a collapsed volcanic crater that used to host a lava lake are located near the center of the structure. Lava flows and deposits made of volcanic ash, cinders, pumice, and rock fragments ejected during eruptions, as well as hydrated mineral deposits, appear in several spots within the structure. In addition to the volcano, a large area of volcanic deposits within the volcano's perimeter has been found, too. It covers an area of 1,930 square miles and contains loads of low, rounded, elongated, blister-like mounds. Such terrain is believed to be a field of rootless cones, mounds produced by explosive steam venting or steam swelling. It happens when a thick cover of hot volcanic materials happens to rest on a water or ice-rich surface. The Noctis volcano seems to have a long and complicated history of modifications. They might have occurred because of the combination of fracturing and thermal and glacial erosion. Researchers believe the volcano could be a vast shield made of layers of pyroclastic materials, lava, and ice. The latter might have appeared due to snow and glaciers accumulating on the volcano's flanks through time. Eventually, fractures and faults developed in the region, probably due to the uplift of the Tharsis region on which the volcano sits. Lava started to rise through various parts of the volcano. It led to thermal erosion and the removal of huge amounts of hidden ice. Entire sections of the volcano collapsed. Glaciers continued the erosion process, giving the numerous canyons crisscrossing the structure their peculiar shape. If this version is correct, then possible hidden sheets of glacier ice around the volcano might be the remains of the latest glaciation that impacted the Noctis volcano. And still, a lot about the newly discovered formation remains a mystery. It's obvious that it has been active for a long time and started to grow early in Mars's history, but it's unclear when exactly. Even though it erupted even in modern times, it's unknown if it's still volcanically active. Will it erupt again when people begin to colonize the red planet? And finally, if it has been active for a very long time, is it possible for the combination of constant warmth and water from ice to allow the site to harbor life?
How many people do we need to create a new civilization? And not on Earth, but on Mars, and in limited conditions. And if we create this colony and send them off, what problems will they face? How can they survive that far away from home without any support? A recent scientific study sheds light on these questions, so let's take a look at it. Alright, so you want to colonize Mars, right? Well, it's not an easy task. Mars is the fourth most distant planet from the Sun and the seventh largest in the solar system. This lonely red guy is very similar to our Earth. Moreover, before it became a boundless desert, it could well have even looked like Earth now. Millions of years ago, there was water, oceans, plants, and who knows, maybe even life. It would be nice to put all these cool things back there. No wonder we've been talking about colonization of this planet for a very long time. Now, SpaceX claims that their proposed interplanetary spacecraft could deliver 100 people to Mars. The owner of the company, billionaire Elon Musk, talked about creating a fleet that could provide a constant flow of resources to Mars. But how realistic are all these fantasies? Actually, not very much. Before sending people to Mars, we need to solve a number of issues. For example, the incredible radiation exposure, toxic soil, low gravity, low temperatures, and all sorts of other nasty things. And this is just the beginning. It will take at least a couple of decades to create a vehicle that can actually successfully land on Mars and return back. But let's do a thought experiment and imagine that we finally decided to colonize Mars. How will things turn out? Recently, scientists published a new study on this topic. This study is called Minimum Number of Settlers for Survival on Another Planet. The author is Jean-Marc Celotti. professor at the National Polytechnic Institute of Bordeaux in France. His article was published in the Scientific Reports journal. As you might have guessed, the study was trying to find out how we could colonize another planet. How many resources do we need? How should this colony live? What kind of work should they do? And how long will it take? And, of course, exactly how many people do we need for all of this? Let's try to answer that. Now, imagine that we've moved into a wonderful future. Well, not really. A terrible future, actually. In his study, Salati suggested that life on Earth was threatened by some catastrophic event, so the only way for humanity to survive is to go to Mars or some other planet. In this imaginary scenario, unfortunately, the supply delivery from Earth was interrupted, or even gone. Now, the colony has to support itself somehow. Well, here's where we already stumble upon a bunch of problems. For example, we're not sure how well the people in the colony will work together. Will they communicate with each other like normal human beings? Will they share their time and resources as they should? Humans are constantly ruining things for other humans. I can even bet that it was their fault we had to flee to Mars. But even if we forget about that, how about organizational issues? What equipment do we have? What will we use to extract resources? What skills would we need? You know what? Who cares? In our case, these things don't matter. All that we know is that the colony doesn't have a lot of initial resources and equipment, and the human factor is absolutely unpredictable. So the chances of survival are pretty low, but we need to survive somehow. In this case, Salati describes two things that will have a huge impact on our survival. These things are essentially variables in a mathematical equation. The first one is the availability of local resources. Basically, it means water, oxygen, and all sorts of useful chemical elements. These resources should be somehow mined and easy to use. Fortunately, we're not starting from scratch. We already know a lot about Mars. What resources are there? How can they be used for life support, agriculture, and industrial production? The colony is lucky because all this has been studied at various seminars and published in reports and books over the past years. Thanks to this, we know what will be available to our colony. For example, we know that gases could be extracted from the atmosphere and minerals from the soil. On Mars, we could provide such things as iron, glass, and even organic compounds. The most important problem here is the service life of the equipment that our new Martians start with. They'll have to get as many materials as possible before the tools break. Keeping them in good condition will be almost the most important task. The second thing is the production capacity, or the speed of work. We have a specific list of things we need to do, make some tools for example, and all this must be produced in sufficient quantities before the literal deadlines. Salati says that the most important thing here will be the so-called sharing factor. Imagine one person trying to survive on Mars. They would have to do all the tasks on their own. They would need to find or build their own system for supplying drinking water, oxygen, and electricity generation. We've already seen how this played out in the movie The Martian. This task wasn't easy at all. There's always not enough time, and all of this is just too much for one person to handle. Unless you're Matt Damon, of course. So, surprisingly, we need a fairly large colony. This significantly distributes the burden. Each person spends less effort, gets tired less, and as a result, the efficiency and speed of work grow. This is where the sharing factor comes into play. Now we need to calculate this number. If we want, for example, to build something, how many people do we need to do this quickly and efficiently? How can we optimize the work as much as possible? Well, it depends on the needs of these people, on available resources, random things like weather, and so on. But in general, this number can be estimated and calculated using some mathematical functions. Salati tells in more detail about these functions in his article. You can read it yourself if you're interested, but in general, he describes 5 areas that need to be taken into account when calculating this number. These areas are ecosystem management, energy production, industry, buildings, and the human factor. The human factor includes such things as the upbringing and education of children, sports, games, music, and so on. In the end, it all comes down to two things: how much time we have and how well the people in the colony will work with each other. So, what was the result of all these calculations? In the end, Salati found out that we would need at least 110 people to successfully survive on Mars. This is the minimal number needed to create a self-sufficient civilization. And it will be better if we don't take too many people with us. The more people we take on the spacecraft, the more difficult it will be to predict the results. After all, as we've already said, humans are always ruining things for other humans. So it's better to stick with about 110 people. Of course, this is a rough estimate, and there are a bunch of different assumptions and uncertainties, but even this number is already very useful. Now the scientists know how many people is a minimum for colonization of another planet. Colonizing other planets is a very complex issue, and it will take us a very long time to resolve it. It's very unlikely that we'll fly to Mars in the near future. This task may take several decades, or even a century. Therefore, the best solution would be to try our best to save Earth until we can begin to conquer other planets.
Hundreds of spaceships take off from Earth's surface and head toward Mars. Fast forward 7 months, and this space fleet of ships is near the Red Planet. Soon they will all land, and a few thousand people will become citizens of Mars. Perhaps they will never return to their home planet, because there will be absolutely all conditions for a comfortable life here. It takes time and many expeditions to create a self-sustaining colony on Mars. Here is how, step by step, people might build a full-fledged city there, with factories, hospitals, apartment buildings, and even clubs and restaurants. First, we need to pick a time to launch the rocket. A launch window opens once every 780 days. That's when the distance between Earth and Mars is the shortest. In this case, the journey will take about 6 to 7 months. Let's move to the launch pad. Here, we see the spacecraft connected to a booster rocket. Ignition! The booster sends the spacecraft into the air. It then undocks and lands back on Earth. At the same time, the spacecraft's engines start and it makes its way to Earth's parking orbit. To make this ascent, the ship has used almost all its fuel and now needs refueling. To do this, we use our booster again. A huge crane places another spacecraft on the booster. There are huge fuel tanks inside the ship. The booster launches from Earth and takes the refueler into orbit. It docks with the spaceship and fills it with fuel. The journey through space may need a total of 5 such refuelings. And for the first mission to build a colony on Mars, we need 5 spaceships. So that's about 25 launches from Earth. Considering that the booster costs $230 million, the refueler $130 million, and the ship itself is $200 million, the price tag on the mission is pretty impressive. So, ignition. Fast forward in time, and the first 5 ships descend to the surface of Mars. These ships haven't brought the first humans. They carry only payloads, like fuel and water supplies, oxygen for breathing, and medical supplies. There are also first living modules, waste management systems, and a huge number of solar panels for generating electricity. Before landing, one of the ships launches a system of satellites into orbit. It'll provide communication on the Red Planet. So, the robots begin their work on Mars. First, a whole bunch of little rovers line up and unfold solar panels. Their total area reaches the size of 7 soccer fields. They're much less efficient on Mars than on Earth. Frequent sandstorms fill the working surface of the panels with sand. But at the same time, the strong winds of the Red Planet also help to wipe the sand away. Other rovers, equipped with powerful drills, begin searching for water in the Martian soil. When they find water, people will begin producing fuel. We'll combine carbon dioxide from the atmosphere with the mined water at a high temperature and under high pressure. It'll result in getting methane for rockets and oxygen for breathing. Since February 2021, Mars Perseverance rover has been testing the technology for oxygen extraction. It has a box inside. This is the Mars Oxygen IRSU experiment, also called MOXIE. This thing pulls Martian air inside and then, under high pressure, takes 1 atom of oxygen from carbon dioxide. Such a thing, about the size of a shoebox, can provide enough oxygen for 1 astronaut to breathe. But if you build the same mechanism but the size of a large factory, it'll produce oxygen for an entire colony and release the rest into the atmosphere of Mars. Another group of rovers is working to turn the surface of Mars into a landing zone to prepare for the next step in colonizing the red planet. By this time, the robotic population of Mars has been working on these tasks for 2 years and 2 months, and people on Earth have been waiting for a new flight window to open. This time, not 5, but 12 spaceships are coming to Mars. 10 of them are cargo ships, which bring construction materials, fuel, and other supplies, as well as a lot of scientific equipment and 3D printers. 2 other ships carry the first interplanetary astronauts. The doors of the spaceships open, and 30 heroes set foot on the surface of Mars for the first time in history. These people are scientists, engineers, and doctors. They have undergone a strict selection and long training to become the first people to conquer another planet. And these guys don't have a return ticket. They'll have to stay on Mars for 2 years. The astronauts live right in their spaceships and try to get used to the unusual conditions on Mars. The temperature here is about minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, the gravity on Mars is 2.5 times weaker than on our home planet. That means a person here can jump twice as high and lift heavier objects. But the muscles in human bodies have a hard time getting used to such a difference, so astronauts can't work full-time. The first thing they do is unload cargo ships and deploy life support systems. Some people are experimenting with turning Martian soil into material for 3D printers. Others are setting up greenhouses and cultivating soil to grow plants. The human waste recycling system the robots brought here is used to make fertilizer for plants. 2 more years and 2 months have passed. We see a launch of a spaceship, not from Earth, but from Mars. The 30 astronauts have completed their mission and are on their way home. It's easier for spaceships to take off from Mars because the gravitational force here is less powerful. At the same time, ships are launched from Earth. They'll bring nearly 100 new inhabitants and even more cargo to Mars. When this space fleet arrives at the red planet, the astronauts can taste the first food grown here. 3D printers begin building homes on Mars. They print outer shells from Martian soil and plant waste. These shells will protect the dwellings from solar radiation and strong winds. And inside the shells, people will build permanent houses. They're inflatable and are equipped with modules brought directly from the spaceships. These houses have living bays, research bays, and communication centers. The construction goes on for 2 more years until the next flight window opens again. Some astronauts leave Mars, but more and more people come here with every new mission. They no longer live in spaceships. There are comfortable underground houses and 3D printed shelters. Most of the food is already produced on Mars. A new generation of robots works together with farmers. Other robots help to build even more houses to accommodate the ever-increasing human population. 2 more years have passed. Various space agencies launch their missions to Mars. There are more people, more scientific equipment, and even tanks with fish. In 2035, Mars and Earth are at a record short distance, so people send a huge fleet of ships with astronauts and construction materials. By this time, the human colony looks like a small city with many interconnected domes. Its inhabitants have already begun building an underground network of tunnels to move between houses, laboratories, and factories. They've also built the first hospital. 2 years later, the population of Mars reaches the 1,500 mark. Almost all of these people will become permanent residents of the planet. 4 years and 2 more launch windows later, the first restaurant opens its doors. Also, the construction of a nuclear power plant begins. Once it's finished, the Martians will no longer need constant supplies from Earth. From above, the colony looks like a small town. There's a farming section where food is grown, a living section, and a factory district. And with each new mission, people bring more and more solar panels. Now their total area equals dozens of soccer fields. All this allows the astronauts to feel at home. They also don't have to wait for food supplies from Earth. 20 years of the human colony on Mars. Its population is now about 30,000 people. Workers begin to bring their families to Mars. The first schools are built here. 30 years. The population is already over 100,000 people. The colony's infrastructure allows it to be completely self-sufficient. People produce enough food, get enough fuel and oxygen. Around this time, the first plants start growing in Martian soil. There's more and more oxygen in the planet's atmosphere. The trees planted in greenhouses contributed to this. The greenhouse effect from all the human activity helps warm up the surface of Mars, if only a bit. People still have to wear spacesuits when they go outside. It will take many more years until people will be able to breathe on Mars like they do on Earth. Gradually, rivers and lakes will appear. Green plants will cover most of the land. And then the inhabitants of Mars will be able to go outside without an oxygen helmet and call the red planet, now green, their home.
It seems to feel at home on any planet, we need the 4 crucial elements: air, water, earth, and fire. I'm gonna tell you what you need to squeeze to get a glass of water on Mars, how to grow your salad there, charge your phone without getting an astronomical electricity bill, and even generate some fresh air. What if I tell you there's an ocean on Mars? Right, you won't believe me, but there used to be an ocean. Scientists believe that nearly 1/3 of the planet was covered with an ocean called Oceanus Borealis. Once upon a time, about 3.8 to 4.1 billion years ago, the climate on Mars was warmer and the atmosphere was denser. But over time, the climatic conditions changed dramatically, and this once endless ocean simply evaporated into the atmosphere. According to estimates, only about 1% of all water evaporated, while 99% is still locked on the red planet. So, there are 2 sources of water now: the ice polar caps and the rocks. Ice polar caps are pretty simple to understand, as we have the very same thing on Earth, but rocks containing water. I mean, my juicer won't handle stones inside it, but let's delve into these stones just a little bit. For starters, there are at least 4 types of hydrous minerals on Mars. There are hydrous clays made of silicon oxygen, and the cool thing about them is that they can even contain magnesium and iron, which will come in handy once we start dwelling on Mars. Next is hydrous sulfates, which are sulfur-based. Don't ew, I know you thought of the rotten egg smell, but it's typical of hydrogen sulfide and not just sulfur. These minerals have water incorporated right into their chemical formulas. Next comes hydrous silica, which also has water locked in its formula. Carbonate salts found on Mars may not contain actual H2O, but they can only form if there's water nearby, so they just prove there used to be an ocean. But if the scientists don't come up with an idea on how to extract water from those rocks, there's a backup plan. In 2020, researchers discovered liquid water sources which may be a part of a huge network of underground saltwater lakes. So I guess we'll find a way to stay hydrated on Mars. We can either look for those water sources better, or just invent some technologically advanced juicer to squeeze water out of those stones. The red planet may seem to us as a lifeless desert where nothing can grow. But today it's a misconception, as there's been a couple of recent updates concerning the agricultural potential of Mars. In 2022, a group of scientists made something unbelievable. They managed to grow an Earth plant on Mars. Disclaimer: it's not that they plowed Mars, watered it, added fertilizers, and patiently waited for the first sprouts to show up. They experimented on Earth, but the conditions they created were purely Martian. You see, a plant needs soil, water, food, and sunlight to grow. Food and sunlight can be created artificially, so the scientists focused on the soil and water in their experiments. There's not much Mars can offer in terms of soil, but it's rich in basalt. Plants don't fancy residing in basalt, as it doesn't have many nutrients, but still, some of them aren't that picky when it comes to soil. As we already know, water on Mars is problematic too, but it can be found in limited amounts. Still, it can't be used for agricultural needs due to its chemical composition. Long story short, it's just way too salty for any plant out there to like it. But to keep the experiment true to life, the scientists started to look for possible ways of desalinating water. Thus, they added the bacteria known as Synechococcus, and even though the saline levels decreased dramatically, it was still not enough to satisfy the finicky plants. Luckily, the scientists had Plan B, and it worked out. They took the bacteria desalinated water and filtered it through basalt. In the end, they noticed that the resulting water was suitable for the plants. But that's just a theory. Let's see what we can actually grow on Mars. The scientists experimented with turnips, lettuce, radishes, and alfalfa. At first, turnips, lettuce, and radishes refused to flourish in basalt and feed on that filtered water. But then alfalfa came into play and it left the scientists stunned. The plant did really well in Martian conditions. This might seem to be the logical end of the experiment, and after all, alfalfa is pretty cool. It's rich in vitamin K, it has vitamin C, some vitamins B, zinc, and phosphorus. And you can Google a bunch of nice salads with alfalfa sprouts. But it has yet another property that may be a total game changer. Because of its deep roots, alfalfa can help fix soil nitrogen fertility. So once the scientists harvested the first Martian alfalfa, they immediately planted turnips, lettuce, and radishes back. This time, the crops did way better, and the scientists even noticed something they didn't expect. Turnip yields increased by 311%. I guess alfalfa has all the chances to become the star of Mars terraforming. Whoops, here comes the bad news. Even though you can theoretically stay hydrated on Mars and enjoy a fresh salad, at the moment, there's almost no way you can enjoy some fresh air on the red planet. Hey, you've noticed I said almost? Even though Mars's atmosphere is 96% carbon dioxide, we already know how to make small amounts of oxygen there. Meet the Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment, but you can call it MOXIE. It's a little helper that works together with Mars rovers. This little guy can isolate oxygen on Mars, and it already managed to produce 5 grams of it. It may sound like nothing, but 5 grams of oxygen equals 10 minutes of breathing. For now, MOXIE is for scientific use only, but it can actually help facilitate missions on Mars. Thing is, it's easier to produce oxygen directly on the spot than transport it from Earth to Mars. At the moment, MOXIE is not powerful enough. But once the scientists invent its descender, the air situation on Mars will change. For the fire to burn, we need one essential thing, which is oxygen. And we don't want to waste the results of MOXIE's hard work, especially if there can be alternatives. Historically, people would use fire to cook, get warm, and probably scare away some uninvited guests like saber-toothed tigers. Today, we can use electricity to cook and get warm, and no saber-toothed tiger has ever been spotted roaming the red planet. So let's see how people can generate electricity on Mars. There are quite a few options. Solar, geothermal, and wind energy can be used on Mars almost the same way we use them on Earth. Solar energy is promising, but it still won't be as effective as on Earth. Sunlight on Mars is only 43% as strong as it is in Earth's orbit, so producing electricity this way will take more effort. Don't forget about dust storms that aren't rare on Mars. During them, the sunlight gets sorta blocked. So should we ever rely on solar energy on Mars, we must be ready for occasional electrical outages. The next problem is seasonal variations. So we could benefit from solar power for only some months of the Martian year. And, of course, no solar energy at night. Anyways, this option might work out, but it should be combined with some alternative. For instance, wind power. Wind turbines won't have any problems working during the dust storm. And they also work at night. Seems like these two sources are a perfect combo. But geothermal energy could be a cool backup plan, though. It can even work on Mars better than on Earth for a few reasons. First, the atmospheric pressure is lower on Mars, so more volumes of steam can be generated to drive the turbine. Second, Mars's surface temperature is lower, and it can help too, as it will increase the efficiency due to thermodynamic laws. Third, no water needed. We could use liquid carbon dioxide instead, and it would work perfectly. And unlike water, liquid carbon dioxide is free.
You and your camera have been literally everywhere on Earth. On top of Mount Everest and at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. You've seen the Nile River, Niagara Falls, the Sahara Desert, the Grand Canyon, and a million other beautiful places. On every trip, you brought back breathtaking pictures. Your album is already as thick as an encyclopedia, and it's time to discover a whole new world of tourism. Let's head on a voyage to Mars. You're sitting in a shiny modern rocket, counting down for takeoff. It might seem like a big deal, but with modern technology, it's practically a ride on a bus. In only a couple of hours, you're on the surface. It's time to head to the first destination for any tourist on Mars, Olympus Mons. It's the size of the entire state of Arizona and is 16 miles high. That's 3 times the size of Mount Everest. And it's the highest mountain in our entire solar system. It's actually even more than a mountain. It's a giant volcano. This entire mountain was formed when streams of lava rose to the surface, flowed down the volcano's slopes, and slowly cooled. The freshest soil layers are about 2 million years old. So scientists don't rule out the possibility that this volcano will wake up one day. Hopefully, you're not close by when it erupts. And there are statues of Greek deities everywhere. There's Apollo, and there Athena and Artemis, and here's Zeus and Neptune. In the myths, these deities lived on Mount Olympus in Greece. These aren't natural, of course. We built these monuments to attract more tourists. There are even plenty of souvenir stalls where you can buy a lightning t-shirt in honor of Zeus. You take your first picture on Mars and move on to the next exciting place. This is a complex of 12 giant volcanoes. Some of them reach almost the height of Olympus. It's like if you piled 60 Empire State Buildings on top of each other. They're so tall because gravity is much weaker on Mars than on Earth. There isn't as much force pushing down on them, so they can grow much bigger than anything you could find on Earth. You feel lighter than you've ever felt before, and you can lift objects 3 times as heavy as you could back home. It's easy to see why the volcanoes are so big when you jump and fly 9 feet into the air. These volcanoes have been erupting for almost 2 billion years. That's almost half the age of our home planet. That's another reason they've gotten so tall. Click! The photo is ready, and you get on the rover to explore the next landmark, Valles Marineris. This is the largest canyon in the world. It's longer than the distance from New York to Miami, and it's 4 times bigger than the Grand Canyon here on Earth. We don't know exactly how it came to be, but the most popular theory suggests that it was all because of the lava, which pushed the crust upward as it moved underground. Over time, these valleys grew into the enormous canyon of Valles Marineris. The next stop is Cydonia. The cool thing about this place is the giant rock with a human face. In 1976, we saw photos from the surface of Mars and could clearly recognize a human head here. People immediately came up with 1,000 theories as to how it could have appeared here. The fun theorizing and speculation came to an end, though, when new photos were taken in 2011. These clearer pictures showed that the eyes, nose, and mouth were just shadows that couldn't be picked out in the original low-quality image. In fact, it's just a hill, a lot less exciting up close. Wear a warm jacket to view the next landmark spot. This is the North Pole. Make sure you keep a tight hold of your camera too. It's pretty windy out here. That ice that you see is carbon dioxide, which looks like that because of the extremely low temperatures. It can get cold here at negative 226 degrees Fahrenheit. This cold place and the North Pole are responsible for the strong winds all over the planet. And there are even geysers at the South Pole. In spring, when it gets warmer, jets of carbon dioxide rush to the surface, taking dust and sand with them. Quick, get it on your camera. Various studies say that there is an underground lake as wide as Delaware Bay, 1 mile beneath a thick layer of ice. Moving on to Gale Crater. This is where the Curiosity rover landed in 2012. Oh, and here's its replica. This little guy has been studying the surface of Mars for years and has found signs of evaporated water. This means that Mars could have fostered life in the past. The rover also found a lot of evidence of organic molecules, as well as methane gas. It could come from microbes and other living things, but we don't know enough yet to say for sure. The existence of life on Mars hasn't been confirmed. but it's exciting to think that there could have been real Martians alive at some point. You take a selfie, like you're holding Curiosity on your arm. Great, the Mars cab is already here for you, and you're heading toward Medusae Fossae. Many people believe that this could be an alien crash site because of the strange appearance of these rocks. Of course, that's not true. Scientists suggest that volcanoes have been erupting here for years. Lava has cooled into rocks, and strong winds have given them strange shapes. This entire volcanic deposit covers an area the size of a fifth of the United States. And here's a place that has made Earth scientists nervous and even scared. Hale Crater and these lines on the slopes. Studies have shown that this place was moistening, meaning that water could flow there. But then it was determined that it was dry sand streams. Scientists fear this place may be home to alien microbes, so you probably shouldn't get too close. Another mysterious place for tourists on Mars is ghost dunes. In the ancient times of this planet, there were dunes dozens of feet high, but then they were flooded by water or lava. Their bases are preserved, but the tops have been erased. The covered areas of these dunes can still harbor microbes. Here, they are protected from wind and solar radiation and may still be preserved. Contact with them can be dangerous for humans, so you take a photo from afar. The next spot is on Mars's satellite, Phobos. Oh, there's a pretty big crowd of people gathered here. And then you see it, Phobos monolith. It's a massive rock as tall as a 30-story building. We learned about this object from pictures taken back on Earth. The monolith casts a great shadow and has spawned many theories. For example, some claim that it was built by an ancient civilization or was left here by aliens. It might even have been a beacon. All these people came here to test the theory for themselves, but it just looks like a rock up close. One more photo, and you have to hurry to the bus that will take you to Jupiter's satellite, Io. It's only safe to be here in special capsule cars that fly over the surface. And when you see volcanoes constantly erupting, you understand why. Jupiter's gravity compresses the insides of Io. They heat up and rise to the surface, erupting in volcanoes on its surface. They eject so much material that Io completely changes its surface every few millennia. Now we turn on the hyperdrives and head out into deep space. Here, in complete darkness, is the Voyager probe. It was launched in 1977 and is still in operation. It's the first human-made object to leave our solar system's borders and is the world's most distant spacecraft. Voyager carries a golden disk with a message for extraterrestrial civilizations. This amazing disk contains pictures of Earth's landscapes, people, animals, and various sounds and music. Unfortunately, it will take many thousands of years to reach the nearest star system, so we're not very likely to hear back from any aliens anytime soon. You take selfies and move on to the next part of the tour. Here, 1,000 light years from Earth, is a black hole, the most mysterious and heaviest object in the universe. It weighs as much as the sun, but it's much smaller. It's so heavy that it attracts absolutely everything, even light. So the black hole isn't actually black. It has no color at all. You can only observe it from a very great distance because it bends time. The closer you are to it, the slower time will go. And if you want to fly just a second closer to it, weeks or even months might pass on Earth in that time. In the old tradition, you toss a coin into the black hole and continue your journey through the distant cosmos. On the way home, you have to stop by an iconic spot on the moon. Here in the Sea of Tranquility, there's an entire park near the landing site of Apollo 11. This is where the first human set foot on the surface of the moon. Neil Armstrong's first boot print is still there on the surface as proof. It was made in 1969, but even now, it looks exactly the same.
Millions of people around the world go out on the streets and rooftops to look at the amazing cosmic phenomenon. Another planet right next to the moon, a big red one. At first, everyone's excited. Mars showing up out of nowhere is having a strange effect on humanity. Just as the moon can affect the psychological and physical state of some people, Mars's unexpected visit is causing people to behave pretty strangely. Every night, the sky is lit up by the white light of the moon and the red glow of Mars. Many people get a sort of instant insomnia. Some even stop drinking coffee because they no longer feel sleepy. Mars brings out energy and a little wildness in people, making them laugh more, and even drives a few poor people crazy. They begin to go out of their houses more often and enjoy the unusual night sky. A few days later, everybody can see what's happening. Mars is getting bigger. Scientists announced that the red planet is slowly moving towards Earth. A collision is inevitable. Earthlings only have a few years left. A few months ago, a huge asteroid crashed into the red planet with such force that Mars simply flew out of its own orbit and went rogue. The chance that Mars would fly close to Earth was always going to be pretty high. After about 3 seconds of being announced, the news went viral and panic set in. The situation's getting worse and worse. The closer Mars gets, the more it affects people on a physical level. Hundreds of videos pop up showing collision simulations of Mars and Earth. And there's no happy ending. Want to see what happens? One famous blogger asked her followers. The Earth's almost completely covered with water, and Mars is all dust, sand, and rocks. Then she puts a huge watermelon in the middle of her room. From the far end, she launches a bowling ball at it. Strike! Mars looks almost the same size as the Moon now. It's about to come into the Moon's orbit, and it's affecting the Earth's magnetic field. Floods, hurricanes, tsunamis, powerful thunderstorms. They go from bad to worse. Animals go crazy. Birds no longer migrate south. The polar northern lights appear in the Caribbean. The economy isn't handling the news that well. People stop showing up to work. Why wouldn't they? They just want to have fun and be with loved ones. There are enough resources on the planet to last until the catastrophe, so no one's even trying to fix the Earth's problems. Clothing, food, cars, yachts, whatever, everything loses its value and becomes free. Every day, huge street parties pop up all over the world. People decide to live their last months in peace and harmony. The global catastrophe is uniting humanity like never before. To go out with a bang, Earthlings team up to organize a huge rock concert. The red giant destroying our beautiful blue planet. Yeah, rock and roll's the perfect soundtrack. There's just enough time to eat, dance, party, and listen to good music. Huge stages are built all over the planet. It's every musician's last concert. During all that preparation, hope suddenly appears. Scientists have calculated all the events that'll occur when Mars crashes into Earth, and they have a simple plan. Luckily, humans had already planned on moving to Mars, so they already have been building spaceships for years. There's no time to get to another planet before the collision, but the good news is that people can wait out the disaster just outside Earth's orbit. You get to sit in a space station, munch some popcorn, relax, and enjoy the show. When the dust settles, it might just be possible to return to Earth, or what's left of it. After learning about this plan, people start working on finishing the ships night and day. Everyone in the world pitches in. There are still 2 years left before the big day. The huge concert stages are converted into more space stations. Mars is now giving people more energy, and with epic teamwork, people manage to create thousands of stations in just a few months. That's what happens when 7 billion people work together. Farmers, physical therapists, chefs, engineers, athletes, accountants, all on the same team. Mars is now closer to us than the Moon. The red giant blocks out the sun, and our planet is plunged into darkness. There are only a few days left. People are working like ants in a massive colony, putting the finishing touches on several 100,000 space stations. It takes 4 whole days for everyone to get on board. Plus, there's the loading of supplies, animals, fish, seeds, plants, vegetables, fruits, video games, fruit roll-ups. The red giant is scheduled to enter Earth's orbit in a couple of days. That's when it will really pick up speed. Mars is only a little more than half the size of Earth, but up in the sky, it looks infinitely huge. The ships start taking off. People take a last look around, memorizing every inch. In a few hours, it'll all change forever. The stations fly up far enough away to clear any orbits. Two worlds colliding together should still have a soundtrack, though. Rock stars on every ship organize an outer space music festival. To the awesome sound of rock, Mars enters Earth's atmosphere and burns a thin layer of its own surface. This releases an incredible amount of energy. It gets faster and faster and smashes into the Pacific Ocean. A huge blast wave sweeps across the entire planet. Everything is lit up by flames, and everyone on the ships has to put on sunglasses to avoid being blinded. Our blue planet is turning into a fiery one. The dust of Mars mixes with the water of Earth. The force of the impact goes through the Earth's crust into the liquid hot magma. Hundreds of pieces of Mars, some the size of entire countries, are somehow floating in the atmosphere. The collision generates so much energy that all oceans boil and evaporate. Seas and rivers of molten metal are now spreading all over Earth. Days, weeks, months pass. A belt made up of bits of Mars forms around the Earth. It's like a fiery version of Saturn. It'll take a long time before it's safe to land back down, but humanity can't stay alive on the ships all that time. Food, water, and oxygen will run out after a few years. But scientists already have a plan. The ships flip a switch and become huge cryochambers. The ships are equipped with energy panels, and the roasting hot Earth's giving off a lot of energy, totally enough to keep the ships working while everyone on board takes a few 1,000-year nap. As soon as the planet cools down, humans will wake up. Hundreds of thousands of years pass. One day, alarms go off simultaneously on all the ships. People wake up, slowly. Their bodies are exhausted, but after a few billion cups of coffee, everyone's ready to go. Down on Earth, new continents should have formed, and the atmosphere is most likely way different. The planet might have lost its original orbit, so it might be spinning at a different angle. The seasons as we know them, gone. All the water on Earth evaporated in the first few hours. But there were huge glaciers on Mars, which might have melted on impact. Mars may have shared its water with our planet. The clouds of dust and dirt should have settled by now, and the ground should be pretty good for growing stuff on. All that magma probably spewed up a bunch of useful minerals and chemicals. It's going to be difficult, but humanity somehow must adapt to the new Earth. People are ready for anything. All the Earthlings run to the nearest windows to see what their beloved planet looks like after all these centuries. Where is it? People are craning their necks, looking out at the empty spot where the Earth used to be. The impact of Mars was so strong that it pushed the Earth out of its orbit around the Sun. It's gone. Great. What are we gonna do now? Some bearded guy grabs a guitar and says, "Let's play!" Imagine something terrible happening to Earth and humans having to leave it as fast as possible. And you have to decide which planet will become your new home. Which one will you pick? Probably the first planet that comes to mind is Mars. It's relatively close. Like Earth, it's also a rocky planet. It even has an atmosphere, even though it's much thinner than what we have on our planet. But at the same time, the North Pole on Earth would seem balmy to you in comparison to Mars. On the red planet, the average temperature is minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. The most radioactive areas on our home planet might seem harmless if you compare them with the surface of Mars. But what if we terraform Mars? Could we keep transforming the red planet until it becomes capable of supporting human life? It would be an enormous feat. Mars is an extremely dangerous place. Should you teleport there right now, without any protective suit or anything, the gas in your blood would instantly turn into bubbles. You can probably imagine the consequences. Add oxygen deprivation, cold exposure, and radiation poisoning to the equation, and well, who's next? If we still decided to terraform Mars, we would need to create a stronger magnetosphere. We've got this protective magnetic layer on Earth. It shields us from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. The red planet would also need a thicker atmosphere, again for protecting us from harmful space stuff better. Right now, the Martian atmosphere is almost entirely composed of carbon dioxide with tiny amounts of oxygen. For us to live there comfortably, Mars would also need to be warmer. And if we managed to somehow warm the planet up, we'd also be able to release frozen carbon dioxide. At the moment, there are vast reserves of this gas at the red planet's polar caps and other areas. It would help the atmosphere to become thicker, making it possible for water to exist on the surface of the planet. Right now, there is some water on Mars. The atmosphere of the red planet is too thin for this water to stay in its liquid form. But under the surface of the planet, it's a different matter. You can find water under the surface of the planet in its polar regions. The only place where this water is visible is at the North Polar Ice Cap. Also, sometimes salty water flows down crater walls and hillsides, and there are tiny quantities of water in the planet's atmosphere, but it only exists as vapor. If liquid water existed on the surface of the planet, it would make it easier for us to start growing plants, and plants, in turn, would begin to produce oxygen. But first of all, we would need to start the warming process. How? Well, Elon Musk suggests using nuclear energy to make Mars more livable. He says it could be done by creating a continuous flow of low-fallout nuclear fusion explosions above the atmosphere of the planet. It could create something like numerous artificial suns. It could warm the planet, melting the frozen ice caps, which would then thicken the atmosphere, causing even more warming. Other strategies for Martian global warming include the diversion of asteroids into the poles of the planet, or the large-scale production of greenhouse gases that could help us heat the red planet. Or we could create a giant space mirror, as huge as the side of Mars. It would reflect tons of additional sunlight onto the planet. The problem is all these projects would have exorbitant costs. They would also require serious upgrades in our technological capabilities. Could there be an easier and cheaper way of terraforming the red planet? It seems so. Casey Hanmer used to work in NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Now he's the founder of a startup hoping to create carbon-negative natural gas by pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere of our planet. He's also made a proposal to terraform Mars for a modest $10 billion. Sounds alluring. So, what is his idea? Mass-produced small solar sails. These are already existing technologies, even though they appeared only recently. Such sails use sunlight to propel themselves, like ships use the wind to sail. These solar sails could be launched into low Earth orbit, and after that, they would fly themselves to Mars. There, they would reflect sunlight onto the night side of the planet. According to Hanmer's calculations, a decade of such launches could result in a 1% increase in temperature on Mars. Hanmer also believes that we could mass-produce solar cells at cell phone factories, all because a solar sail would need a processor, a camera for navigation, and some electronics to be able to transmit data, just like a smartphone. In other words, solar sails would be like small satellites using cell phone technology. Each of these sails would also need a sail of its own, a thin space blanket weighing about 2 pounds. When unfurled, it would span around the size of 2 basketball courts. Would this plan involving solar sails enable people to terraform Mars? Hanmer doesn't think so. Even if we put loads of money into solar sails, they would only make the red planet warmer and more humid, but they still wouldn't be enough to make Mars suitable for human life. Most scientists are also very skeptical about the very idea of terraforming this cold, dry world. They say that carbon dioxide and water vapor are the only greenhouse gases present on Mars, but there's just not enough of them to change the situation. Let's say we manage to melt the polar ice caps with the help of Elon Musk's nuclear technology or solar sails. And still, this ice will only release enough carbon dioxide to bring the atmospheric pressure to 1.2% of what it is on Earth. Plus, most of the carbon dioxide gas wouldn't be accessible, and we wouldn't be able to mobilize it. Even if we decided to go through an energy-intensive process of the extraction of carbon dioxide from the planet's soil, dust, and minerals, we'd still only get the atmosphere to a mere 5% of where it needs to be. Water is another problem. It is salty on Mars. It might even be as salty as the oceans on our planet. But these salts aren't what you find on Earth. If a person consumed a certain amount of them, they would be highly toxic to the human body. Who's next? On our planet, these salts are formed as byproducts of rocket fuel, as well as in road flares and fireworks. Naturally, they only occur in very dry areas. If there are no particular bacteria to break them down, these substances accumulate year after year, and their concentration in water is constantly increasing. But in theory, it's possible to purify even such water. The process of filtration could help the astronauts get rid of 90% of harmful substances. Then they could use a UV disinfection unit. This would also help get rid of any foreign molecules, if there are any, that might be hiding in the water. This stage would not only protect the astronauts, but also prevent them from bringing any dormant Martian microbes back to Earth. In other words, future travelers to Mars shouldn't have too many problems with drinking water on the red planet, but only if they bring the right purification equipment that can deal with any water quality. Because however bad running out of water in the middle of a desert is, experiencing it on another planet sounds much more terrifying. Anyway, back to terraforming the red planet. Once you start thinking about it, some worrying questions arise. Who is supposed to decide whether we should start this process? When should we start it? What if there's some form of life on the red planet, like indigenous microbes we haven't spotted yet, and our attempts to change their home will disturb them? What if they don't survive these changes? Now, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. So imagine being one of the first people sent to explore Mars. As you're approaching the red planet, something strange and creepy draws your attention. There, yes, right there. Doesn't it look like a mammoth bear's head? What or who could possibly create a bear's snout in the middle of a crater? Unfortunately, or should I say luckily, there's nothing mysterious about the bear's head. It's just a facial pareidolia. That's a tendency to see facial features in everyday things. But speaking about the finding on Mars, should we rename the phenomenon into Pareidolia? You could see that coming, couldn't you? Alright, check it out. You see a V-shaped hill that looks like a nose. Then there are two craters that look like eyes. And then there's a circular fracture pattern, the head, that surrounds the nose and the eyes. Experts think that the face could be created when a deposit was settling over a buried impact crater, and the nose might be a mud or volcanic vent with solidified lava or mud flows around it. Anyway, the crater does look like a bear's face, I'll give you that. But thanks to HiRISE, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's high-resolution imaging science experiment camera, another of NASA's amazing acronyms, we've seen many other crazy craters on the red planet, like smiley faces, a bird, or an elephant. First, let's have a look at the famous face of Mars. These images were first taken by the Viking orbiter in 1976. At that time, the resolution was obviously quite poor, plus the lighting was slanted, which produced the result that shocked people in the 1970s, a face carved of rock staring back at Earth. Did it mean there was another civilization on Mars that had created this monument? Nah. Look at the photo of the same spot taken by the current Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. The resolution is much, much better, and the face has miraculously turned into an ordinary hill. Or look at this teeny Bigfoot, whose image was captured in 2008. I say teeny because this creature is just a few inches tall, and when the photo was taken, Bigfoot was only several yards away from the camera. And here, one curious soul zoomed in on a small rock and spotted something that resembled a gorilla. That's how some people started to believe there were apes on Mars. Yeah, really. Let me show you some more examples of imaginary creatures and faces on the red planet. Most of them come from a series of images taken by the Themis camera. Currently, it's on board the Mars Odyssey spacecraft, which only needs 2 hours to orbit the red planet, carrying some important scientific instruments. Let me introduce my Happy Martian to you. This 2-mile-wide crater was photographed in 2008. The next crater chain looks like a wasp with its wispy wings of impact debris. The whole feature was probably created by a meteorite that fell at a very low angle and broke into pieces right before the impact. Now, do you see a woolly mammoth or an elephant here? Lava flows in one region on Mars left this image on its reddish soil. The region itself, called Elysium Planitia, is famous for the planet's youngest lava flows. For example, the one that looks like a mammoth most likely formed in the past 100 million years. Just yesterday. Now let's talk about love, or rather its symbol, the heart. Do you like these 2 hearts on the surface of the red planet? This one is actually a mesa top outlined by frost, and this heart shape is an impact crater. The hit tore away dark surface material and exposed lighter soil underneath. Then some of the material probably flew downslope, creating the heart. And this dust-covered hummingbird, can you see its long beak and head? Scientists aren't sure how this shape was formed, but they think erosion and wind played a part in its creation. These dark sand dune deposits look like a howling wolf. And here, can you see a series of interlocking gears? This image looks like the letter T, right? The right angle fracture was created by the tectonic stretching of the Martian crust. Do you think we might find other letters of the alphabet on Mars too? Why not? And now, how about another bizarre thing astronomers noticed on the surface of Mars? Is that a door to someone's house? It was NASA's Curiosity rover that sent this image to Earth. It became viral because this formation over here, see, looks like a door. Unfortunately, scientists, due to their rational minds, were quick to disappoint us. They claimed that it was just a natural part of the Martian landscape. There were several clues that made them think it wasn't a real door. For example, the opening is tiny, a mere 3 feet high. They're sure that what looks like a door is actually an opening in a rock created by natural forces, like winds and erosion. If you look at the rock closely, you may notice strata. Those are layers of silt that stand out because they're harder than the surrounding material. These strata dip here on the left and a bit higher on the right. They likely appeared around 4 billion years ago in a river or a wind-blown dune. Since the strata became visible, powerful Martian winds have eroded them even more. And look at this. See those cracks? That's how rocks weather on the red planet. This small cave probably formed when several fractures crossed the strata. A pretty large boulder might have fallen out under its own weight, and this created the door-shaped opening. This theory is quite plausible, because even though the gravity on Mars isn't as strong as on Earth, it's still strong enough to do it. Besides, see that rock to the right of the opening? It has a suspiciously smooth vertical edge. It must be the culprit. It probably fell out not so long ago. But it's not only the red planet that can boast of having unusual formations. Let's take this comet, for example. This image was taken by the European spacecraft Rosetta in 2014. Can you see a face on its right-hand side? Or the moon. Here's its famous rabbit. It sits upside down with its ears pointing downward. Some people see a man on the moon. It can either be his face or the entire body. If someone sees the whole human figure, it usually looks like it's carrying sticks. Sometimes it's a toad. To spot it, look at the top left-hand side of our moon. The toad is facing upward, see? Now look at this spinning neutron star. Such a star is a collapsed core of a supergiant star with a total mass of 10 to 25 solar masses. Except for black holes and some hypothetical objects, like quark stars or white holes, neutron stars are the densest and smallest known stellar objects. Anyway, back to this particular star. As you can see, this space object, located 17,000 light-years away from Earth, is surrounded by a cloud of energetic particles. And this image, taken by NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory, appeared in 2009 and became viral in no time. All because many people spotted a hand-like structure among all that space stuff. NASA explained that the star was spinning incredibly fast, spewing energy into the space surrounding it. This created intriguing and complex structures, like the large cosmic hand so many people see. Now, look at the Horsehead Nebula in the constellation Orion. This is a freezing cold and dark cloud of dust and gas that was first noted in 1888. This dark shadowing is created by dust, and at the base of the nebula, there are many bright spots. Those are young stars at the stage of formation. Pay attention to this extremely bright star in the top left side of the Horsehead. Its radiation is so powerful that the star is starting to erode the cloud around itself. It means that in millions of years, the nebula might not resemble the head of a horse anymore. Well, I won't be around then. The European Southern Observatory Very Large Telescope has captured an image in which we can see the collision of 3 different galaxies. We can even observe the effect they have on each other. But the coolest thing is that while colliding, they created a recognizable shape. Because doesn't it look like a giant space hummingbird? It seems like NASA and China are each planning to send humans to Mars. Both space agencies have tentative plans to launch the first crewed missions by 2033, right when Mars and Earth are playing a game of tag. And that's not all. Other missions may happen in 2035, 2037, and beyond. The ultimate goal is to build a Mars habitat for future exploration and research. So, how are they going to do that? Well, let's find out. Now, traveling to Mars isn't as easy as hopping on a rocket. The distance between our planets can change a lot over time, ranging from around 35 million miles to 250 million miles. And even with our best technology, it takes 6 to 9 months just to get to the red planet. So, a round trip to Mars could mean spending 3 years away from Earth, dealing with extra radiation and floating around in microgravity. But NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory has some exciting news. Scientists have been working tirelessly to design a minimal architecture mission to Mars. They're thinking that 2033 is the perfect year to make it happen. So here's the deal. Every 15 years, the rocky planets, Venus, Mars, and Earth, align just right to create a cosmic sweet spot. The mission will make the most of this rare alignment and perform an epic gravity assist maneuver using Venus. It's like getting a boost from a planetary slingshot. We'll speed up our spacecraft and reduce the need for making our own propulsion. The report also talked about some really cool ideas, like using nuclear power for spacecraft engines and using Martian resources to make things. These technologies could make space travel faster, protect astronauts from radiation, and make it easier to live in space. They might even let us make resources and fuel right on Mars. So, this is how the plan goes down. First, we'll launch a spacecraft towards Mars. It'll spend around 30 days in high orbit, exploring and gathering valuable data. Then, it's going to head back to Earth, also swinging by Venus for a quick visit. So this whole adventure will last approximately 570 days, which is just 1.6 years. And a shorter adventure means less exposure to radiation. Now keep in mind, this mission will focus on orbiting Mars rather than landing on its surface. It's just a stepping stone, paving the way for future landing missions. Just like Apollo 8 mission orbited the Moon before Apollo 11's historic landing. Landing on Mars by 2033 might be a bit too ambitious due to funding constraints, but who knows? If all goes smoothly, it could become a reality. Now for the coolest part. We don't need fancy new technologies or vehicles for all this. We'll make use of existing ones that are already in production or being studied for the Artemis Moon program. Now let's break down our Mars mission vehicle. A big puzzle of many parts. And guess what? It was put together by a community of space enthusiasts back in 2017. That's right, it wasn't the scientists who produced it first. But now, this isn't just some fantastic idea anymore. Most of these things are already becoming a reality, being made or planned by NASA. So let's take a look at this concept. First, we have the Orion spacecraft. This is the spaceship that will take the crew to the orbit around Earth and bring them safely back home. It's like a super fancy space taxi, and it might be the most powerful taxi to ever exist. It's combined with 3 powerful propulsion stages, and we're also using a special fuel that doesn't need to be ultra cold like in the movies. Next, there's the Earth departure stage. This is an important part of the mission. It helps us make a powerful thrust that sends us on our way to Mars. Then we have Mars Transit Habitat. This is where the crew will live and hang out during their journey to Mars. Like a cozy space house with all the things they need to be comfortable. And finally, the Mars Orbit Insertion Stage. When we reach Mars, this awesome thing will help us slow down and enter its orbit smoothly. It's our maneuvering expert. Even the Mars Transit Habitat is being developed and might even be tested in a few years. That means we're on track to have the whole thing ready for our amazing Mars mission by 2033. In other words, it's all about working with what we've got and making it happen. Now, let's talk about the plan's timeline. Mid-2028, the action begins. First, we'll need to do a couple of test flights. We'll send 2 stages ahead of time to make sure we can come back to Earth safely. These stages will join together like 2 spaceships becoming best buddies. They'll orbit the red planet and then come home. To do all that, we'll use powerful rockets and 13 commercial launches. It's going to be a huge space party. Late 2032. After all that, we launched the fully assembled Mars mission vehicle to high Earth orbit. So far, this is an empty vehicle that awaits astronauts. If all is good, then it'll be ready for the final check. March 2033. Time for our brave crew and their Orion spacecraft to join the party. We launch them and they dock with the Mars mission vehicle in Earth's orbit. They'll make sure the whole lot is just right before we head to Mars. Flexibility is important, so we can adjust our plans if needed. April 2033. Everyone's ready for the adventure. We perform a powerful burn, like a big push that sends us on our way to Mars. The crew will travel for about 200 days. November 2033. Finally, the crew reaches the red planet. Once they're in Mars orbit, they'll spend about 30 days exploring and doing awesome space stuff. Mars will be our playground. When it's time to return home, they'll say goodbye to the stage that helped them get into Mars orbit. Then their vehicle will meet up with the 2 stages we sent ahead. Remember these space buddies? And after that, it will take us about 340 days for the crew to come back to Earth. This is where we'll use the gravity of Venus to slingshot around the Sun. To keep the equipment and crew at the right temperature, we'll have a sunshade that will protect us from the sun's heat since we'll be really close to it. In the end, Orion will re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down in the water. What a heroic ending! And this would be just the beginning. Our awesome team has another plan for the bravest adventurers out there. It's called the Conjunction-class long-stay mission. It launches in April 2033 and lasts a long time, 950 days. That's more than 2.5 years, with 550 days spent in Mars orbit. It requires fewer launches from Earth, but has some different challenges, like spending more time in microgravity and dealing with increased radiation. So we'll need some real space heroes for this one. But of course, there are some major hurdles to overcome before we can make all this happen. Experts closely looked at NASA's Journey to Mars program and found that the plan needs some serious changes. There are a few high-risk areas, like life support systems for long missions, using solar power for propulsion, making oxygen on Mars, and so on. They're also worried about timelines, funding, and many other things. So, according to them, sticking to a deadline of 2033 might be impossible with the current plans and budgets. Even aiming for 2035 carries significant risks and possible delays. But hey, Space exploration has never been easy, right? With realistic determination, anything is possible. Most likely, the idea of sending people to Mars will be realized before 2040. NASA is working on finishing the plan and details to make this possible. So, even though we still have some tough nuts to crack before we can make it a reality, the dream of sending humans to Mars is exciting. It's a thrilling adventure full of challenges, discoveries, and the spirit of human exploration. So, let's show the universe what we're made of. And that would be mostly carbon.
So, we have to consider the logistics. Another thing to look out for is caves in the ground that are not necessarily stuck on mountains. Scientists believe that most potential places for humans to thrive are caves. These spaces are large enough to host large populations. So far, they identified 9 caves as large as football fields. So what would life look like if we lived in caves on Mars? For one thing, sunlight would be hard to access. By the time we reach Mars, we would have the best technology to maximize our lifespan in a hostile environment, which means withstanding the harsh sun rays of Mars. Most likely, we would dig through the caves further underground where oxygen would be pumped for everyone to breathe. People can walk around casually, thinking they're on Earth, and to exit the caves, you would need to wear a special suit. These cave colonies would have dormitories for people to live in and special spaces for colony meetings, entertainment, grocery markets, schools, and other places that are needed to sustain a colony. There would also be indoor farms to grow crops and raise livestock. A team of experts mapped out what some of the dwellings will look like on Mars. And just like on Earth, we will have apartments for young professionals, family homes, and luxury mansions. Some of the dwelling units would be placed on the surface and not in caves. One of the key elements of the design and architecture is how to build it around the natural light to brighten up the homes. Another element is how to deflect radiation and cosmic rays. Because Mars has such a thin atmosphere, sun rays and other hazardous objects easily enter Mars. The dwelling units also have to be sturdy to protect them from severe dust storms and extreme cold temperatures. Some of the living pods or dwelling units that are for couples or singles would have tunnels leading to a shared workspace and garden. Studies show that even being in the presence of greenery can reduce stress levels significantly. And on the red planet, we would definitely need some greenery. We can expect the family homes to be built within the caves, not necessarily underground. It would be tempting to head outside with the view of Mars, but the large thick glass would prevent anything from coming in and out. Those who are underground with a view rely on LEDs and camera systems to screen the surface landscape of Mars so it acts like real windows. And if you're bored of the surface, you can always switch the channel and watch something else as you please. Maybe a flowing river surrounded by trees. Or maybe a penthouse view of all of New York. The choice is yours. There would be a driveway that leads to a garage so one can enter and exit easily. There won't really be a reason to exit the cave colony except probably to visit other cave colonies. In this case, we would have highly crafted vehicles that will take people from colony to colony on the surface. The vehicles can withstand harsh temperatures and would be constantly transporting people daily. Some people might live in a certain colony and have to commute to work every day in other colonies. Humans might not have to be working in dangerous conditions or on the surface. We would have robots that will do that for us. The thing about robots is that they don't need to be human-shaped to do a job. However, before transporting humans to space, we would need to create some human-like robots and land them on Mars. With the exact physical form, we can determine what would happen to people if they were on Mars. We would have robots for specific tasks, helping us with everything. Let's not forget artificial intelligence plays a major role in monitoring the systems and updating the functionalities of the colony. It'll know when certain systems need fixes. Then come the other people who wish to start their life on Mars. People would need entertainment, so musicians would find a place in the colony. We can't expect everyone to go out on a nice sunny day to the beach, but perhaps one day, when the colony is large enough, there can be an artificial body of water with the same elements as the beach. livestock animals would also be shipped from Earth to be raised on Mars, where they can populate for our nourishment. We can also bring most of the animals and establish a wildlife sanctuary for everyone to enjoy and for the animals to thrive. For now, humans are planning on reaching the Red Planet sooner than we think, and who knows, maybe you can be one of the first people to sign up and have your own little dwelling unit far away from Earth.
Imagine humankind effectively colonizing the Red Planet, and you're one of the first people to brave this challenging journey. During the long flight, you entertain yourself with the thoughts of landing on Mars, getting a nice piece of land, building a house. Wait. The problem is you can't own anything in space. Broadly speaking, no one can own space. But this issue becomes more complex than that once you start looking into the particulars. Space is governed by a special agreement called the Outer Space Treaty. According to this treaty, outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, can't be subject to national appropriation, even by means of use or occupation. In other words, no nation can declare itself the owner of any part of space. So, that piece of land on Mars can't be yours. Space is declared to be the province of all humankind. But the contents in space are a different matter. For example, you might have a right to occupy a certain orbit. It means that you can place and keep your satellite in that orbital slot. Plus, when a nation registers its space object, it gets the right to exercise exclusive control over it. So, if one country built a moon base on the surface of Earth's natural satellite, this base would belong to this nation. But no one would be able to claim ownership over the land this moon station would stand on. But then, how about asteroid mining? Asteroids are rich in minerals, in particular, such metals as iron, nickel, gold, platinum, magnesium, palladium, and many others. According to NASA estimates, the value of asteroids that we could potentially exploit for resources could be worth as much as $700 quintillion. And a quintillion is a number with 18 zeros. Who would be the owner of all that wealth? Well, the Moon Agreement obliges the participants to establish special procedures to control the exploitation of the natural resources of the Moon and other space bodies. But so far, it's still a bit unclear what rules this process will follow. In total, there are 5 international treaties related to space law. They're all overseen by the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, UNCOPUOS. You've already heard of the Outer Space Treaty. It's the foundation of international space law, and here are its principles for space exploration and operation. First of all, space activities should benefit all nations. Any country can actually explore orbit and beyond. There can be no claim for sovereignty in space. No dangerous weapons are allowed in orbit and beyond. The Moon, the other planets of our solar system, and other celestial bodies can be used solely for peaceful purposes. Any astronaut from any country is considered an envoy of humanity, and all other nations that are the participants in the treaty have to provide them with all possible help when needed. It includes an emergency landing in a foreign country or at sea. Also, each of the countries that signed the agreement is in charge of its space activities and must provide constant supervision. And finally, nations are responsible for damage caused by their satellites and other space objects, and must prevent space contamination. Now, even though nations can't lay claim to space and its resources, are there any constrictions determining who can keep stuff from space that landed on our planet? For example, in July 2022, space debris from SpaceX fell in a farmer's backyard in the snowy mountains. If this is the case, space junk must be returned to the country where it came from. But what if it was a meteorite carrying potentially valuable minerals? Specialists say that if this space traveler lands in your own backyard, as opposed to the property you rent, then you become the owner of this meteorite. But if you find the same meteorite on public land, you won't be able to keep it, because meteorites are classified as protected objects under the Protection of Movable Cultural Heritage Act, 1986.
What a nice cosmic family. Meet Mars. I bet you've met him before. These two little guys are Phobos and Deimos, Mars' small moons. But it seems like Mars isn't treating the little ones the right way. Phobos and Deimos are believed to be captured asteroids. However, Phobos is gradually moving closer to Mars due to gravity, and it is predicted that it will eventually be destroyed by the planet's gravity within the next 35 million years. I won't be around then. So, I imagine this will result in a ring of debris around Mars, similar to Saturn's rings. However, this process is a natural phenomenon and not an act of destruction by Mars. Apparently, Phobos is getting ripped apart by the crazy gravitational forces of the red planet. But wait, there's more! Phobos has these crazy parallel grooves all over its surface. We used to think that they were from an asteroid crash, but now scientists think they're actually from Mars's intense gravity pulling the moon apart. Talk about a rough ride! Scientists have this wild idea that when a little guy like Phobos gets too close to a big guy like Mars, it starts to stretch out towards it. They call it the tidal force. Phobos is predicted to get stretched out so much that it'll actually break apart. Crazy, right? And the debris from the moon will form a tiny ring around Mars, just like Saturn's rings. Now, some people thought that Phobos' tiger stripes were caused by tidal forces before, but that theory got shut down because the moon is just too darn fluffy. But now, these genius researchers ran some computer simulations and found out that maybe there's a hard shell underneath all that fluff that could create grooves on the surface. But don't worry. At the rate Phobos is going, it's going to crash into Mars in about 40 million years. But if tidal forces are already tearing it apart, it might not even last that long. However, we'll still have the chance to learn more about Phobos. NASA just picked 10 rockstar researchers from all over the U.S. to join the science working team for JAXA's Martian Moons Exploration, or just MMX mission. As NASA-supported participating scientists, they'll be helping JAXA explore the two Martian moons, Phobos and Deimos. And get this, they're even planning to land on Phobos and grab a surface sample. The mission is set to launch in 2024, and we'll get our hands on that sample in 2029. 7 of the lucky researchers will be using the MMX flight instruments to conduct their research. Phobos is a real oddball. It's only 17 miles wide and orbits Mars at a distance of 3,728 miles, to be precise. Now that's way closer than Earth's moon, which takes a whole 27 days to orbit us. But Phobos is in a death spiral toward Mars and is slowly falling towards the planet's surface at a rate of 6 feet every 100 years. But there must be a reason why Mars is acting that nastily, right? What if it's all just because of plain vengeance? Well, okay, picture this. Mars is minding its own business, being all hot and watery like a young Earth. It's got a sweet magnetic field that's protecting it from cosmic radiation and keeping its atmosphere nice and thick. Hey, life is good. But then, at least 20 asteroids, each the size of a small country, come crashing down on Mars like a giant game of cosmic whack-a-mole. One of them even leaves a crater that's almost 2,000 miles wide. Now imagine how Mars must feel with 2 asteroids being its moons after what other asteroids did to the red planet. All these impacts are like a massive punch to Mars's gut, and its already weak magnetic field is knocked out cold. The core gets all overheated and can't circulate properly, which means no more magnetic field to protect the planet. It's like as if you were wearing nothing at the depth of the Mariana Trench. If it were possible, you'd be defenseless and chilly. It's basically what happened to Mars. So now, poor Mars is out there in the cold, unprotected from all those nasty cosmic rays. It's like going outside without sunscreen. Not a good idea. But at least we can learn from Mars's mistakes and make sure Earth doesn't have the same fate. Maybe we should start investing in some asteroid insurance. But trust me, the red planet isn't mean at all. It's actually pretty friendly. While Mars may seem to be pretty tough for Phobos, there's something that might be thriving with Mars's help. So get this, a team of scientists found a way to grow rice on Mars. Yep, you heard me right. They used MMS, not the outdated way to send pictures, but a special soil called Mojave Mars Simulant. It's supposed to mimic Martian soil. And here's the catch: Martian soil has these nasty percolate salts that can be toxic for plants. So the team grew 3 types of rice, 1 normal and 2 gene-edited with mutations that make them better at handling stress like drought or salinity. And guess what? The mutant strains were able to root in soil with 1 gram of percolate per kilometer. Take that, Martian soil! But hold up. The rice grown in the MMS didn't turn out as great as the ones grown in regular potting soil. So the team decided to mix 1/4 of the potting soil with the Martian simulant, and looky there, the plants started developing better. Now these scientists aren't just thinking about feeding Martians. They also want to see if their findings can help grow crops in places on Earth with high salinity. And get this, the whole project started when 2 researchers met for coffee and decided to try growing plants together. Well, isn't that nice? I suspect you're about to say, hey, but if you want to grow rice on Mars, you have to ship insane amounts of water from Earth, and it's not easy to quench this plant's thirst. You're right. You need about 449 gallons of water to only grow a pound of rice. But guess what? Scientists made a groundbreaking announcement at the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Texas. They found a relic glacier near Mars's equator. That's right, water ice on Mars, even near the equator. This is huge news, and could mean there's even more ice just below the surface. It's not just any glacier, it's a relic glacier that's estimated to be 3.5 miles long and up to 2.5 miles wide. It's like the size of a small town. It's got all the features of a glacier, including crevasse fields and moraine bands. But get this, it's not actually ice. It's a salt deposit that formed on top of the glacier while preserving its shape. So, how did this salt deposit form? Well, it turns out that volcanic materials blanketing the region might have something to do with it. When these materials come into contact with water ice, sulfate salts may form and build up into a hardened, crusty layer. Over time, erosion removed the volcanic materials, exposing the sulfates and revealing the glacier's unique features. This glacier is young, likely from the Amazonian geologic period. That means that Mars has had surface ice in recent times. Who knows what other icy secrets Mars is hiding? But hold your horses, there's still more research to be done. Scientists need to figure out if there's still water ice preserved underneath the salt deposit, or if it has disappeared entirely. And if there is still water ice at shallow depths near the equator, that could have major implications for human exploration. Imagine being able to extract water from the ground at a warmer location. That would be a game changer. So let's see what else these scientists uncover about our favorite red neighbor. Maybe someday we'll even get to visit that salt glacier statue in person. See you next time.
Mars can be secretly messing up the depths of our oceans. The red planet is 140 million miles away from Earth, so we once thought that it couldn't have much of an impact on us. But that changed recently with the discovery of some kind of butterfly effect. What starts with a small gravitational pull in space ends up creating giant whirlpools down here. This suspicion began when scientists decided to explore almost 300 deep holes drilled in the ocean floor, which were made back in the 60s. Their goal was to understand the strength of deep ocean currents by analyzing sediments. Materials like sand or mud that accumulated at the bottom of the ocean over the last 65 million years. The bottom of the ocean has layers upon layers of sediments. When these layers show a continuous pattern, it means that the materials have been gradually layering over time without any sudden interruptions. In other words, deep currents were calm and stable. But the researchers also noticed a strange pattern. During specific time periods, they couldn't find any records of sedimentation, which means that something else was interrupting this process. The most likely reason for these gaps was the presence of intense currents at the bottom of the sea. Because they were so strong, they probably moved sediments from their original spots. But here's the weird part. All the gaps identified in the study occurred at intervals of exactly 2.4 million years. The data showed a total of 27 gaps. That can't just be a coincidence. So the scientists realized they were not checking simple breaks in the sedimentation process, they were analyzing the presence of cycles. According to experts, the only plausible explanation for them lies in space and is probably the result of something known as the astronomical grand cycles. To understand this process, we first need to mention the Milankovitch cycles. They're named after the Serbian scientist who suggested a century ago that changes in the way Earth moves around the Sun and tilts on its axis can affect Earth's long-term climate. The thing is, the movements of Earth can be affected by many things, including other planets. Normally, our planet's orbit around the Sun isn't a perfect circle, but it's pretty close. However, from time to time, this path is directly affected by the gravitational pull of Jupiter and Saturn. So it's kind of like these two giant planets can pull our orbit, causing it to become more elliptical. Variations like this can affect the amount and distribution of sunlight, changing the climate here on Earth. According to the Milankovitch theory, Earth's climate patterns change in cycles of 405,000 years, 100,000 years, 41,000 years, and 23,000 years. And the theory is that these cycles might trigger the beginning and the end of glaciation periods, also known as ice ages. His theories were actually confirmed in the 70s by scientists who were also looking for evidence of these cycles in ocean floor sediments. Recent calculations have shown that besides the Milankovitch cycles, there are climate changes that follow much slower rhythms. They don't change every tens of thousands of years. Nope. We're talking about periods that stretch out over millions of years. And this is exactly what the astronomical grand cycles that I mentioned earlier are about. We know about such events basically because of evidence based on mathematics and computer modeling. But it is really hard to find any geological proof of the existence of these million-year astrological cycles, or any clue of how they affect Earth. That is, until now. Turns out, what scientists found at the bottom of the ocean could be just the proof we needed. And that's because the 2.4 million period lines up exactly with records of interactions between Earth and Mars. As the two planets chart their orbital paths, their gravitational fields interact in a process known as resonance. Yep, exactly like what happens with Jupiter and Saturn. From time to time, the gravitational forces of the red planet pull our orbit a bit closer to the Sun. And just like the shorter Milankovitch cycles, this grand cycle also affects our climate. In this case, by increasing the solar radiation that reaches Earth, making our planet warmer. To be honest, experts believe that this amount of extra solar radiation that Mars can somehow give us is not that big of a deal. I mean, it's not going to make our planet so hot that it will make us feel like we're stepping onto the Sun. But this slight difference in climate can be enough to change some behaviors on Earth, such as ocean currents. Warmer climates tend to produce more frequent major storms, and that often produces sediment-stirring eddies, also described as giant whirlpools, which can reach the seafloor at the deepest parts of the ocean, known as the abyss. Finding those gaps in the deep ocean sediment record is really impressive because it's probably the strongest evidence we have of the astronomical grand cycles. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it's all like the butterfly effect. Every 2.4 million years, Mars's gravitational pull shifts Earth's path around the Sun, causing our climate to warm up. And when the planet is warmer, it can lead to the formation of large whirlpools, which end up turning the deep ocean waters upside down. And there's one more thing. The cycles found in the research also line up with already known periods of warmer climate throughout world history, like the famous Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. This event took place around 56 million years ago, when Earth was warmed by about 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Loads of theories have popped up trying to figure this out, like a glitch in Earth's orbit or maybe the passage of a comet. But with this new study, it looks like Mars could also be involved in this event. These new findings are pretty convincing and exciting, sure, but scientists still need to do more work to link these possible cycles of climate change with deep-sea currents. I mean, they did a good job of finding an explanation for the sediment gaps, but so far, it's just a suggestion. Their success is really important for the whole scientific community, though. After all, knowing when exactly these astronomical grand cycles happen and how they affect Earth can help us a lot, especially to differentiate when climate change happens due to a natural event and when it occurs due to human intervention. Studying these whirlpools can also provide scientists with crucial insight into how climate change affects ocean circulation. So, another reason why this finding is so crucial has to do with the potential collapse of the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. In short, this is a system of ocean currents that circulates water within the Atlantic Ocean, being responsible for bringing warm water north and cold water south. This is what brings warmth to different parts of the globe and also carries nutrients necessary to sustain ocean life. However, there are some fears that this system might stop or become too slow anytime soon. If that happens, oxygen-rich surface waters would no longer mix with deeper waters. But the good thing is that this possible link between Mars and Earth gives a positive take on this situation by suggesting that in a warmer world, more intense deep ocean currents may prevent our seas from stagnating. But again, it's just a suggestion. The evidence is still thin. Some skeptical experts like to point out that although eddies have indeed become more active over the past few decades, satellite observations have shown that their currents aren't always able to reach the seafloor and maintain an effective water circulation. For now, all we know is that it's hard to say who is right. Only the following studies will tell.
Mars is a dry, rocky, and barren planet. It's difficult to imagine that once upon a time, the red planet could have had a landscape similar to ours. But scientists believe that this is the case and that millions of years ago, Mars was filled with vast oceans of water. In early 2021, NASA sent their most advanced rover yet to the red planet. Its mission is to search for any signs of microbial life that hint at the planet's past. They named the rover Perseverance, or Percy for short. Even Percy's initial landing on Mars itself was a scientific discovery. The rover landed using auto-navigation along with onboard cameras to track the planet's surface and find the ideal spot to land. This helped scientists work out the best landing options for future missions to Mars. Percy currently roams the red planet, guided by a new and highly advanced auto-navigational system. The majority of his day is spent analyzing rock formations. Percy is decked out with a high-tech laser that fires a tiny pinpoint beam into rocks. The laser creates a plasma from the rock samples. Then Percy's onboard spectrograph analyzes the plasma to identify the chemical composition of the rock. Two of Percy's most significant findings so far are rocks that have been nicknamed Mazi and Yigo. These words come from the Navajo dialect, in tribute to a NASA engineer from the Native American Navajo tribe. Mazi means Mars, and Yigo means diligent. These two rocks are both salt-like in composition, meaning they are igneous rocks. If you're not familiar with your rock species, igneous means that the rocks were formed from a volcanic eruption. The current shape of Mazi and Yigo suggests that they have been molded by a watery environment. This could be proof that Mars was once filled with water. Another interesting rock discovered has been nicknamed the harbor seal. This is a dark, smooth rock that scientists believe had been sculpted by powerful northwesterly winds to resemble the playful marine animal. For decades, scientists have theorized about the wind and weather patterns on Mars. This finding seems to support their existing weather modeling of the planet. Percy has sent back over 20,000 images since arriving on Mars in February, including an internet-breaking selfie. Audio files have also been sent from the Mars mission. For the first time ever, we can listen in to the eerily and ambient sounds of extraterrestrial winds on the Martian landscape, all thanks to the rover's onboard microphones. For the first time ever, oxygen has been produced using human technology on another planet. Inside Percy is a gold-plated box around the same size as a car battery. This is the MOXIE unit. MOXIE stands for Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment. Yeah, that's a bit of a mouthful. 95% of Mars' atmosphere consists of carbon dioxide. The MOXIE unit diffuses the carbon dioxide and through an intricate chemical process turns it into oxygen. The unit has produced a modest but still historic 5 grams of oxygen. This works out to around 10 minutes of breathable air. It's also a good sign for what could come in the future. Who knows? Maybe one day MOXIE can produce enough oxygen to support a human colony on Mars. For now, scientists are more focused on MOXIE producing enough oxygen to create rocket fuel. In order to propel the standard-sized modern-day spacecraft off of Mars, you would need 7 metric tons of rocket fuel and 25 metric tons of oxygen. This would be far too heavy for a spacecraft to bring from Earth. So, if there is ever to be a manned mission to and from Mars, there needs to be some way to create fuel on the planet. For those of you worried about Percy being lonely, he actually has a special companion up there with him. Stowed inside the rover on his descent to Mars was a small but expensive helicopter named Ingenuity, but you can call her Ginny for short. The mini helicopter cost NASA $80 million to develop, but every penny was worth it as Ginny made history by performing the first powered drone flight on another world. Ginny was a massive scientific feat, as engineers originally struggled to design a helicopter dinky enough to be stowed on an interplanetary rover, but powerful enough to take flight on another planet. After the success of Ginny, scientists are now collecting data from the one-of-a-kind helicopter to aid in the design of smart micro-drones here on Earth. The helicopter is used to explore terrain that is unsuitable for the rover. Ginny hovers over the Martian landscape, collecting data and taking aerial photographs to send back to Earth. Ginny is powered by solar panels above the rotor blades. A big concern for scientists was that the panels would get covered in thick coatings of Martian dust and leave the helicopter powerless. Luckily, airflow from the blades actually self-cleans Ginny's solar panels. Inside her mechanisms, Ginny carries a small postage stamp-sized piece of fabric from the Wright brothers' historic 1903 flying airplane. This is a loving tribute to the original pioneers of aviation. The Curiosity rover first landed on Mars back in 2012 and has been roaming the red planet for over 12 years. Curiosity wasn't designed to detect life as Perseverance was, but instead to determine if Mars had any of the necessary elements that could sustain life. This includes things such as liquid water, carbon, energy sources. Curiosity found a site scientists called Yellowknife Bay. This site once contained an ancient lake. The rover discovered minerals left behind from the waters, showing that the lake water was not too acidic or too salty. It would have had a balanced pH. Carbon, nitrogen, and other elements that could potentially support life were all found within the crater of the ancient lake. And most important of all, Curiosity found potential sources of energy for microbial life. So maybe there could be existing life on Mars after all. Curiosity made history by being the first Mars rover to witness and measure a planetary-wide dust storm. Just like on Earth, wind constantly blows on Mars, grinding away at the geology. This creates lots of dust, which eventually gets whipped up into large clouds. The dust clouds absorb sunlight and heat up, making the winds more intense. Without any rain or oceans, every few years the clouds grow so large that they wrap around the entire planet and create a giant dust storm. In 2018, Curiosity witnessed one of these great storms from the Martian surface. It noted that sunlight on the planet decreased by 97%, and many large sand dunes were left behind. Curiosity has spent more than a decade measuring the radiation environment on Mars. This allows scientists to work out if humans could safely visit the red planet without turning radioactive. So far, the news is encouraging, and the Mars radiation levels are comparable to those experienced by astronauts aboard the International Space Station. This means that astronauts could endure a long-term round trip without having to worry about radiation too much. Mars is home to the largest volcano in the solar system, Olympus Mons. This giant volcano is 14 miles high. That's about 2.5 times the size of Mount Everest. The volcano was formed millions of years ago, a time when Mars was filled with countless volcanoes, spewing molten lava across the planet's surface. Olympus Mons is a shield volcano, so rather than violently spewing lava and flames up into the air, lava would flow slowly down the sides of the volcano. This gives it its low, squat appearance and an average slope of only 5%. At only a few million years old, Olympus Mons is still a fairly young volcano. Because of this, scientists believe that it could potentially still be active, so maybe it could erupt at some point in the future. The Curiosity rover doesn't just eye up the local geology, it also takes a note of what's happening in the sky. In March 2021, it captured these shimmering iridescent colors in the sky, named mother-of-pearl clouds. This colorful display occurs when all the cloud particles are nearly identical in size. It usually happens shortly after the clouds have formed.
The soil beneath your feet is red and dry. The place is freezing cold. Rusty-colored dust is floating in the air. You make one step, then another. It's hard to move because of the thick layer of dust your feet are sinking into. You're on Mars, and you've come here after hearing some absolutely incredible news. These days, the so-called red planet indeed looks dry and dusty. But scientists think that this world might have been very different a long, long time ago. They have found some evidence of a huge ocean that could have existed on the surface of Mars about 3.5 billion years ago. And this ocean probably covered hundreds of thousands of square miles. It all started with numerous satellite images of the surface of the red planet. They were snapped at different angles. As a result, researchers managed to construct a relief map of the area. They charted out more than 4,000 miles of specific formations that had most likely been carved by rivers. Those formations could also be channels, once carved out on the sea floor. Scientists used the data gathered by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter in 2007. They analyzed the thickness of the ridges and their angles and locations. Their main goal was to explore the topographical depression called Aeolus Dorsa. It turned out that all those years ago, this part of the red planet had been undergoing a series of constant changes. They could have been caused by the rapid movement of rocks, pulled around by currents and rivers, as well as noticeable increases in sea level. Researchers also noticed a pretty clear boundary that separated the southern highlands of Mars, elevated and highly cratered, from the smooth lowlands of the planet. It looked very similar to a shoreline left by a ginormous ocean. This all likely means that in ancient times, there indeed was an ocean on the surface of Mars, and a large one at that. What's even more exciting is that the existence of such an ocean might mean the existence of life. This discovery can tell scientists a lot about the ancient climate on the red planet, as well as its evolution. We now know there had to be a period on Mars when the planet was quite warm, and its atmosphere was thick enough to keep so much liquid water. What's even more incredible, the climate in the northern hemisphere of Mars 3 billion years ago could have resembled the one we have on Earth nowadays. But then, where is this ocean now? What happened to it? Perhaps the climate of the red planet was becoming cooler, and the surface of the ocean froze. There's a theory claiming that these days, the ocean remains in its frozen state deep under a layer of rock, debris, and dust under a northern plain called Vastitas Borealis. Or the ocean's waters could have been lost to the atmosphere, and eventually space through the process of atmospheric sputtering. During this process, atoms get knocked away from the atmosphere after colliding with high-energy particles coming from the sun. Anyway, the theory of an ocean that once covered a substantial part of Mars's northern hemisphere hasn't been confirmed yet. Scientists are still arguing about its existence. As for now, Mars is a very cold world with an average temperature of -80 degrees Fahrenheit. The planet's surface is rocky. It's covered with dry lake beds, craters, volcanoes, and canyons. The ocean that might have existed on Mars isn't the only awesome thing about this planet. Let's speak about those sandstorms raging on the red planet. In movies, they're depicted as incredibly powerful forces of nature, destroying astronauts' camps and tearing their spaceships into pieces. But how much of it is true? Mars is indeed infamous for producing dust storms so massive they can be seen by telescopes on Earth. They sometimes cover continent-sized areas and can last for weeks at a time. But besides them, There are much rarer storms that occur once in 3 Mars years, which is about 5.5 Earth years. Such storms are larger and much more intense than regular ones. They encircle the entire planet. That's why scientists call them global dust storms. At the same time, it's unlikely that even a global dust storm could cause serious harm to astronauts or their equipment. Even though Martian storms are massive, the wind speed reaches 60 miles per hour tops. That's less than half the speed of most hurricane-force winds on Earth. Plus, this comparison of wind speeds can be kind of misleading. The atmosphere on Mars is just 1% or so as dense as the atmosphere on our planet. It means that the wind there needs to blow much faster to cause any damage, or even fly a kite. Now let's move to the next amazing phenomenon spotted on the red planet. When you look at it from a distance, it looks like an eye. There are even some winding channels that look like veins running through the eyeball. But the closer you get, the less the formation looks like an actual eye. It's actually a giant crater, almost 19 miles in diameter. Around the crater, which looks as if it has a pupil, there are other, even bigger craters. They likely formed billions of years ago. That's when Mars had to withstand multiple attacks of space rocks. But why is the eye crater darker than the surrounding landscape? Scientists think that once, water filled the ginormous pit. Remember those channels? They were likely carrying that water. And since the crater was filled with water, it stopped some substances and minerals from eroding away. Your next destination is Valles Marineris. That's an enormous canyon, or rather, a canyon system, that runs along Mars's equator. It stretches for more than 2,500 miles. It's also 4 times as deep as the famous Grand Canyon on Earth. The thing is so huge, it could span the entire continental United States from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. Most scientists think that Valles Marineris is a huge tectonic crack in the crust of the red planet. It could have formed when the planet was cooling down in the distant past. Another breathtaking sight on Mars is the largest shield volcano in the entire solar system, Olympus Mons. It's more than 370 miles in diameter, which means it's almost the same size as the state of Arizona. The mountain is also 16 miles high and rimmed by incredibly tall cliffs. To imagine the sheer size of the volcano, let's make some comparisons. The largest volcano on Earth is Mauna Loa, around 2.6 miles high and 75 miles across, which actually sounds pretty impressive. But the volume of Olympus Mons is around 100 times larger than that of Mauna Loa. The Martian giant could swallow the whole chain of Hawaiian Islands, from Kauai to Hawaii. Scientists have been wondering for quite some time why this volcano is so large. It might be the result of lower surface gravity and higher eruption rates. Or the reason may be the red planet's crust, which is very different from Earth's. On our planet, the crust is made up of 15 to 20 moving tectonic plates. As plates move over hotspots that produce lava, new volcanoes form, and the already existing ones become extinct. That's why lava can get to the surface through many vents. But on Mars, the crust isn't broken into the same tectonic plates as on Earth, and the lava has nothing to do but pile in one very, very large volcano. Now, if you visited Mars and decided to go on an evening stroll, you'd witness a strange phenomenon. It occurs on the red planet after sunset, when temperatures fall below -80 degrees Fahrenheit. A bizarre, mysterious glow spreads across the Martian sky. Unfortunately, without special equipment, you wouldn't be able to observe this soft glow. Visible only in ultraviolet light, this night glow is the result of chemical reactions that occur dozens of miles above the surface of the red planet.
NASA made this cool rover called Curiosity and sent it to Mars to see what else we can find out about the red planet, the one that will possibly become our next home. Curiosity has been exploring the surface of Mars, taking measurements, and gathering data about the planet for more than 10 years. And good old Curiosity stumbled upon some interesting wave-rippled rocks in the region of the Martian surface that was kind of expected to be drier. Scientists believe this area was actually a lake bed. It might be the bottom of a dried-up lake and all that sediment and other things that have accumulated there. All this can give us some important clues about the history of the lake. For instance, the types of organisms that might have lived there, how deep the lake was, how long it was there, and similar stuff. These wave-rippled patterns tell us that these rocks may have formed when strong Martian winds were moving the water in this big ancient lake. You know that specific sound you can hear when you're holding a seashell to your ear? You actually hear it because of the way the air gets trapped inside the shell and moves against its walls. The air cannot escape, so it vibrates at frequencies that depend on the size of the shell. In other words, you have a feeling you hear the sound of waves hitting a shore. That's Mars in my imagination now, a spot where you can still hear the long-lost sound of waves crashing against the shores of mysterious gigantic lakes. During its mission, Curiosity also came across a metallic object which turned out to be a meteorite. This unusual rock that came from space is made of nickel and iron. Its name is Cacao, and it's about the size of a small car, 6.5 feet long, and weighs over a ton. This is an important discovery because we don't often find metallic objects on the Martian surface. Most of the rocks there are made of basalt or some other volcanic materials, so that chunk of metal could tell us more about the history of Mars and how it formed. Plus, it definitely stands out. The surface of Mars is red from oxides, while Cacao is metallic-looking and dark gray. It's rounded and smooth, too, which means it once passed through Mars's atmosphere. There have been other robots exploring Mars, too. For instance, NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, MRO, stumbled upon circular sand dunes. Sand dunes are usually very common on the red planet. They come in many different shapes and sizes, but circular ones like these are really rare. They consist of dark sand with light-colored material surrounding them. And the cool thing is that these dunes are arranged in a specific pattern, similar to the spokes of a wheel. It could be because of the way the winds blow. But back to our buddy, Curiosity. It's been exploring many other interesting things, like oxygen levels in the Martian atmosphere. The levels change depending on the season. There's more oxygen in the spring and summer. It's still not clear why, though, and of course, even that is not enough for us to really breathe there. The concentration of oxygen on Mars is 0.1%, which is about 100 times less than the concentration in Earth's atmosphere. The atmosphere of Mars is mostly made up of carbon dioxide, with traces of other gases. Curiosity was so good that it also decided to analyze the age of rocks it found. It seems they're much older than we previously thought. Some of them date back more than 3 billion years. Curiosity found organic molecules in soil samples too. These molecules are basically building blocks of life. Now, this doesn't prove there's indeed life on Mars. It's just one of the things that suggests there might have been some form of life a long time ago. Curiosity discovered potential evidence that there might be a large reservoir of liquid water beneath the south polar ice cap, probably very salty and full of different minerals. This high salinity is the reason why this water could remain liquid at temperatures well below freezing. It would be cool to have some sort of subsurface ocean to take a dip in, especially when these crazy Martian winds are raging on the surface. And it would be great to have something that would protect us from those insane radiation levels on the red planet. There are some pretty toxic chemicals and salts in the Martian soil, which can be really bad for humans. Astronauts could potentially end up being exposed to these toxic chemicals, either through direct contact with the soil or by inhaling dust that contains these salts. Also, these substances could be a problem for growing crops. This is a really big discovery for long-term missions to Mars, because astronauts would need to be able to grow their own food so they can survive while there. Another thing that favors the idea of potential life on Mars is discovering methane there. Methane is a very important finding because usually living organisms produce this gas. So, where did it come from if not from them? In reality, there are a few possible explanations for that. One is the geological activity of underground reservoirs. Another idea is that meteorites brought methane to the red planet. What's interesting is that levels of methane are higher in particular areas. So, yeah, I don't know about you, but I'll stick to the theory that it comes from living organisms. Now, it's possible that volcanoes on Mars are still active. We know there are many extinct volcanoes on the red planet, but we've never found enough evidence to prove that some of them are still alive. Scientists studied volcanic deposits and found out that some volcanoes could have erupted maybe 50,000 years ago. Before that, everyone thought the last eruption happened 3 to 4 billion years ago. If you could compress the geological history of Mars into just one day, this would be like having an eruption a second ago. So, you never know. There might still be magma bubbling in secret under the Martian surface. All the future generations that might end up building their life there could really have some fun. Mars turned into a cold and barren place that can't really support life over time. And one of the main reasons for that was losing its atmosphere. The red planet used to have a much thicker atmosphere, similar to Earth's. One major reason for that is its relatively weak magnetic field. Earth's magnetic field helps protect our atmosphere from the solar wind, a stream of charged particles that comes from the sun. Without this protection, Mars had nothing to help it confront this insanely strong force that eventually took away most of its atmosphere. Another factor that played a big role in the loss of Mars's atmosphere is its relatively low gravity. Because Mars has weaker gravity than Earth, it's easier for gas molecules to escape into space. So Mars probably used to be more similar to our home planet. But with its current thin atmosphere, it can't keep any heat, which makes it very cold and very complicated for us to explore. But maybe it's better for us that we didn't visit the red planet back in its old times. There's this story about an ancient megaflood that might have happened there. So yes, the red planet probably used to be a wetter and more hospitable place than it is today, with beautiful flowing rivers and amazing lakes, ponds, and other bodies of water. And some research showed evidence of large channels carved into the planet's surface. These channels are way bigger than any we previously found on the planet. They suggest this megaflood happened billions of years ago. Perhaps it happened as a result of different factors, like volcanic activity, melting ice, and the release of carbon dioxide from the planet's crust. The flood may have created some temporary pools of water too. Hopefully, it will mean more interesting clues for finding traces of